Okay, JT, we're ready.
Good morning. Let's try that again. Good morning, everybody, and early. Good morning and welcome to the July meeting of the ICOC and Application Review Subcommittee. Maria, will you please call the roll?
Hanfog Dulak,
Yes.
Mohammed Abu Salam,
Yes.
Kim Barrett,
Present.
Dan Bernal, George Blumenthal,
Here.
Michael Botchin. I think I saw Michael.
I'm sorry, I was muted.
Okay,
Here.
thank you. Linda Boxer,
Present.
Leandra Clark Harvey,
Present.
Anne-Marie Dulage,
Present.
Isabel Dudon,
Present.
Mark Fisher Colbury,
Here.
Fred Fisher,
Here.
Elena Flowers, Judy Gasson,
Here.
Larry Goldstein,
Here.
David Higgins,
Here.
Steve Julesgard, Rich Lahara,
Here.
Pat Levitt,
Here.
David Lowe,
Here.
Linda Malkus, Shlomo Melman,
Here.
Christine Miskowski,
Good morning.
Lauren Miller-Roden, Adriana Padilla,
Here.
Joe Panetta, Al Roulette,
Here.
Barry Selleck,
I'm here.
Marvin Southard,
Here.
Michael Stamos,
Here.
Jonathan Thomas,
Here.
Art Torres,
Present.
Christina Vori,
Here.
Carol Watson. GT, we have a quorum.
Okay, thank you very much, Maria. We'll start with the chair's report. A couple of things on that. Just wanted to tell members of the board that I spent Tuesday through Thursday down in San Diego at our first in-person Bridges conference since 2019, and can report to the board that there was just a tremendous level of enthusiasm on the part of all of the participants. They were so happy to be back together, and that as always, the agenda was first rate. A number of members of the CIRM team gave talks. There were several scientific talks that were very, very interesting, straight out of ISSCR, as well as on the third day, a pair of panels, one, an advocacy panel chaired by Katie Sharifi from our communications team and featuring our own Isabel Dudon, who I'm going to turn to in a second for a few comments on that. And then a terrific science communication, social media discussion by Katie and Esteban Cortez, also from our communications team. As always at these meetings, there were sort of specific sidebar discussions that were very interesting. One, on the first day, one of the Q&A after Maria Milan had finished her presentation featured a question, or more of a statement actually, from a gentleman from Humboldt State who commented that he's gone out in the community where he goes to school and talked to people about stem cell research, and has gotten a number of, the way he described it, was angry responses and questioning about the validity of it, and comments about stem cell clinics. And on sort of further pressing, he discovered that most of these people got their information on stem cell technology from Joe Rogan. And so we had at the dinner afterwards, I had Katie and Esteban and I had a more lengthy discussion with him, and he said it was just really interesting that there's, even now this many years into CIRM, there are still many people out there that have misconceptions about the value of stem cell research, and indeed still have opposition to it. And it sort of drove home the real value of our ever increasing emphasis on communication to the public. So that was one thing I thought was very interesting. The second thing was I always like to, at these dinners, go around and, as did all the members of the CIRM team, sit with these kids and there's the folks who run their programs. And one group I happened to sit down by coincidence was the Berkeley City College group, and chatted with them. That 5 or 6 members in their cohort, chatted with them about what they were doing. And then the next morning had occasion to talk to the woman who runs that program. And I described this because it's interesting. She commented to me how, and some of you may recall, when these programs were up for consideration and approval by the board, Berkeley City College's program was not recommended for funding. They were just below the funding line, principally because, among other things, they hadn't been in the most recent loop of awards. And in programmatic review, we commented that given that there's so many fine students at that facility, and it's that they would benefit greatly from having the program, we decided to elevate Berkeley City College to the programs that were recommended for funding. And she was profuse in her thanks to the board about that, and just said that it meant the world to these kids who were in the program and that they'd done fantastic work. And so I just bring this to the board's attention because it speaks to the value of programmatic review and things that we consider in our discussions from time to time. The posters at this, if you've never had a chance to be at one of these sessions or the Spark program, or high school end of year event, which is next week, the posters that these kids put together to describe their work are just fantastic in their level of complexity and detail and sophistication, and the just tremendous level of enthusiasm that they have for having had the experience over the past year. I would strongly recommend in future years, if you get a chance, to go to one of these end of year meetings, because they're so worth seeing what the result is of this program. So the other thing, just wanted to, as I said, that on this advocacy panel that featured Isabel, I wanted to just give her a couple minutes here to make a few comments, because I thought that panel was terrifically received by the audience and very valuable. So Isabel, if you could just give a few words, please.
Thanks, JT. I want to add, I also heard from the director at Berkeley College. And one of the things I learned was that that is a Hispanic serving institution. And so she was reminding me that many of those are people who are 30 years older and above, who left school and are coming back in an attempt to move forward with their ability to be employed and to, in this case, follow science. So I was really thrilled that she was thrilled. And I'm so glad that we, the board, were able to see above and beyond just scores and to recognize that the humans behind this who are going to be able to make a difference going forward and who come from these communities that we talk about when we talk about inclusivity. So I was thrilled to hear from her. About the panel itself, there were about 125 students in the room, both undergrad and masters, and some with terrific skill sets and training. And as JT mentioned, the posters, I went around looking at all of them, and I said to a few of them, I can't even pronounce the names of some of the headings. So the science is way above my pay grade, but congratulations for such wonderful work. One of the things I did do, as I kind of veer around what I wanted to say, was that I asked them, how do I know to go back to my community and explain to them that they're included in this research and that this might help them or a loved one down the road? So did you, in your stem cell line, know the variety and the inclusion of different communities whose stem cells were pulled out. And, you know, it was kind of, as I said, being scientifically ignorant at some level, I wasn't sure that in fact that should and could apply. But they really got very thoughtful about it. And some of them even expressed that they did have some questioning about that. And I said, well, push. When you're in the lab, push, ask, demand to know. Don't just accept what is, you know. So that was one of my side conversations. The advocacy panel itself was 3 of us, and it gave the students a real different perception about what patient advocacy looks like. 2 of us, of course, advocate somewhat with the experience, both cancer and Parkinson's. Nancy Renee from Sickle Cell Foundation, because her grandson was born with sickle cell, and she became a very strong advocate and has been engaged for 19 years. The exciting part for Jennifer Robb is that she's engaged in developing lab and clinical trials, something that's somewhat new to the work she's doing, but very exciting, and also developing a wellness center for Parkinson's, because the need to center resources for the community who have to deal with Parkinson's at one level or another. These are wonderful things for budding scientists to hear. And of course, I talked about my engagement across the cancer space, from both engagement of Latino cancer service agencies to engagement in research through policy development. The thing that struck me, and one of the students got up and said it was one of the better panels in the whole science meeting, which was interesting to me. But I think it's because it speaks to their heart, and gives them the reason behind why they do the science and why it's really about the people behind the science. And so one of the things, JT, that struck me was that a lot of Latino students came to me. Some of them got up during the event, but a lot of them came to me individually. And what I heard was not just their enthusiasm for their work, but I also heard the cultural conflict, because they also had to deal with family on multiple levels, sometimes actually in conflict with family, who sometimes didn't understand the dedication it took to become the scientist, or even the burden of becoming the scientist and the costs and other things that they had to give up in order to do it. And so I hoped and felt that I'd given them pep talks and some guidance. And it said to me, JT, I said, I should do this kind of regularly with these students, just have them come up in a webinar and sit around and have these conversations. And I thought maybe all of us should do this at one way or the other, that we participate or offer to participate. I would encourage every one of you, if you haven't had an opportunity to go to one of these sessions with these students, I'm sure each of you could be a wonderful model, because sometimes the lab is the lab, but is that external relationship that can help them go back into the lab and continue to succeed, but to feel heard and to feel nurtured and to feel that someone really gets who they are and where they're coming from. And this, I think, is what's going to keep them fighting whatever they have to deal with in the long run, and keep them centered on becoming those scientists of the future. So I really encourage you all to be able to have an opportunity to participate. And JT, I'm sort of offering myself to have call it the circle of CIRM, to bring maybe Latino students together in a webinar, not to be exclusive, but to give them an opportunity to share what it is that makes them culturally who they are, and why sometimes it needs to be heard by someone that they think hears them. So, I mean, that was my impression, but I was totally moved by all of them and by their commitments.
Great. Thanks so much, Isabel. And I think that's a wonderful idea. And we can take this up further amongst our communications team on how we might implement some of those great ideas. So thanks to all the members of CIRM who were at this meeting, and it was wonderful to see everybody, some of you for the first time in person in many, many months, for those of us in Southern California. So the second thing from the chair's report, I want to turn it over to Judy Gasson to give a bit of an update on the chair and vice chair search. Judy?
Thank you very much, Chairman Thomas. So to remind everyone where we are in the chair and the vice chair search, in March and April, we conducted a survey of the board members to gather the input with respect to the criteria for the chair and the vice chair and the scope of the positions. And thanks to all of you who participated in that survey. In April and May, the governance subcommittee considered the results of the survey, and we prepared recommendations for the board regarding the criteria, the scope, and the percent effort required. In May, the board considered the governance subcommittee recommendations, and they were approved. And we're now in July, and I'm happy to report that the governance subcommittee on behalf of the board has requested that the constitutional officers nominate candidates for chair and vice chair no later than September 15th. They're not required to meet this deadline, but we're hoping to encourage them to meet this deadline to give us the opportunity in future board meetings to consider the nominees. So if we remain on schedule, in September, the governance subcommittee will vet the nominees and request additional information as necessary and conduct initial interviews. And then in September, October, the full board will meet to consider the nominees for chair and vice chair. And at that time, it will include public presentations by the candidates, closed session interviews, and a public vote. And if everything remains on schedule in January, assuming we've elected a new chair and a new vice chair, in December, the individuals will take their oath at the first board meeting in January of 2023, providing an orderly transition from the current chair and vice chair to the new chair and vice chair. Thank you, Chairman Thomas.
Thank you, Judy. And thank you to you and co-chair Christina Vori and all members of the governance subcommittee for all the work you put in on this. It's been a considerable amount over the course of this year and will continue to be. My one comment I would like to ask the board, all of you, if you have any candidates for either position that you think might consider throwing their hats into the ring, I would strongly encourage you to talk to those people, because between all the members of the board, we have a very extensive reach, and it's perhaps the best way to get to potential candidates. So please think about that as we move forward here, noting that Judy said that we're trying to get the constitutional officers to make their nominations by September 15th. So time is beginning to get of the essence here, particularly approach August and any vacation time and all that sort of thing. So thank you very much in advance for that. Okay, so that concludes the chair's report.
JT?
Yes.
I just wanted to add one thing. We've posted the presentation where it outlines criteria and qualifications and what we're looking for to our website under the job postings. So if any of you need to reference that, you can send that link out. I'm happy to send it to you if you'd like me to.
Yes. Maria, could you just preemptively do that to all members
Sure.
of the board, please?
No problem.
Thank you. Okay. Next, we will move on to the president's report. Dr. Milan.
Thank you, Chairman Thomas. Dr. Creasy, would you kindly share the slides? It's a wonderful opportunity for us to give you some updates today, but also you'll be getting presented to you some action items and requests from the CIRM team. So the presentation is about to come up. I think Abla, it's maybe at the beginning of that. Are you able to share? If not, Doug Guillen, if you wouldn't mind just posting the PDF, that'd be great. So,
Abla's on mute, but I think she would like to share the slides unless.
okay, she's just not able to get to mine. She just has hers at this point.
I think
But
she
I wanted
added.
to open the presentation by kind of also reinforcing the magic that occurred during the Bridges meeting that Isabel and JT had covered so nicely. I want to thank Kelly Shepard, who's our scientific officer, who really headed this program, and it was a very special in that we had an opportunity to meet students, and basically a running theme was they didn't know that it was possible for them, given where they came from, what their background was or an interest, and that was very touching. So here I am with the President's Report. Next slide, please. My President's Report today will be very short because in the last meeting, just last month, I had the opportunity to provide a very extensive update on where we are. But suffice it to say that our mission is beating strong in terms of the progress we're making. Our mission to accelerate world-class science to deliver transformative regenerative medicine treatments in an equitable manner to a diverse California and world. We are living and executing on every single word in this mission, and you know that because you have been there alongside us as our board members and key advisors. Next slide, please. So as you recall, our strategic plan is arranged in these three pillars or three thematic themes or three strategic themes. In the last meeting, we were able to update you on some amazing kind of collaborations with other groups, such as the Foundation for NIH Industry, and FDA through the Bespoke Gene Therapy Consortium. Our partnership with the Heart, Lung, Blood Institute for our sickle cell program also beating strong. We have concepts under development that will be brought to the board in the upcoming meetings regarding infrastructure and programs that will connect the scientific community and promote team science. All of these themes, by the way, embed into them diversity, equity, and inclusion principles. And we don't just use the terminology. It almost seems too succinct to call it DEI for shorthand, but we are truly executing on that. And you will see that, and you'll have an update on that in upcoming meetings in terms of providing opportunity for all. You have heard about the Bridges meeting, which is really a snapshot of how we are have already been impacting access to the communities, to underserved communities, underrepresented groups, to our education programs. And in the upcoming meeting in August or September, I believe, you will hear recommendations to fund additional education programs where a key feature is mentorship of these underrepresented student groups within the university system. So that's extremely exciting. All the education programs together, along with our scientific programs, we are providing ways that we can interconnect these programs so that there is the opportunity to empower all the programs toward accomplishing the mission. And you will continue to see that in upcoming meetings as we report on these programs. Now, just the centerpiece here in terms of delivering real world solutions, that is basically the major theme that we will report on today. Next slide, please. So the strategic plan in action in this particular thematic pillar in delivering real world solutions, we're going to start off with an amazing portfolio update from Dr. Abla Creasy, our head of therapeutics development. She'll give you an update on how we are accelerating and advancing the science toward the clinics, embedding with it the principles of DEI, embedding with it the idea of team science, but also advancing the regulatory paradigm, as well as teeing it up. So you will hear how this plays into. I'm sorry, there's a echo. Maybe, okay. And somebody else's slide is showing, which approved and paid are nice words, so they're very inspiring, but they're on the slide deck now, not related to this presentation. And by no means a hint, but for board consideration, by the way, you will hear today from Dr. Sombrano a recommendation for an additional clinical trial program, which would bring us up to 81 clinical trials directly funded by CIRM. This is incredible. In cell gene therapy, often first in human clinical trials. And again, you'll hear about that portfolio from Dr. Creasy. And then the third thing is for board consideration, Dr. Shyam Patel will present a concept for approval for manufacturing partnership that's intended to overcome the hurdles to commercialization and bringing the science out to the communities. Many of you have been involved in the shaping of this proposal. Many of you have been involved in the multiple meetings and workshops, along with the various academic and industry stakeholders to shape this proposal over the years. And we're very excited to present that today. Next slide, please. And so I get to introduce Dr. Abla Creasy, who's our VP of Therapeutics Development, who will be giving an update on our portfolio, really demonstrating how the strategic plan is just where it needs to be in order to push the mission of bringing more of these programs from the science to the bedside, from the bench to the bedside. Dr. Creasy.
Thank you, Dr. Milan, Mr. Chairman, board members, CIRM colleagues, and the public. The goal of my talk today is to familiarize you with the CIRM clinical portfolio with emphasis on rare diseases development. So overview of our clinical portfolio metrics is shown here. Can you see my slides, by the way?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so advancing therapies to marketing approval will be today's focus. 106 progression events to date that include projects that advance from one grant to another, such as from discovery to translation or translation to clinical. That's what we call progression events. 14 clinical awards that include CLIN 1 and CLIN 2 since the passage of Proposition 14, with 35% of them in the area of neurology. 15 drug candidates with accelerated FDA designations. The advantage of that is it allows the grantees to have the opportunity to have more frequent interactions with the FDA, and that often is helpful to advance the programs. 81 clinical trials, including today's proposed award. The clinical portfolio today is rich with several disease areas. As you see on the y-axis, we have diabetes, we have heart disease, we have HIV/AIDS, and neuro. And the pie chart displays that neurological and blood diseases play a prominent role in the portfolio. Remember, we accept grants. We do not necessarily pick the grants when we recruit them. So 26% of our R&D portfolio as of to date is in the area of neuro. CIRM has thus far invested $2.68 billion in R&D with $1.1 billion in clinical development. As shown on this slide, here we have 53% of the clinical grants are in the area of rare diseases. Here are brief facts about rare diseases. I'm sure you know a lot of them, but I thought I'd just remind you. There are over 7,000 rare diseases or conditions that each affect fewer than 200,000 people in the United States. Rare diseases are often serious and life-threatening. Currently, 25 to 30 million Americans live with a rare disease. The economic burden to the US can be as high as 1 trillion, as you see here in 2019, that was the case. The past process for approving drugs for rare diseases by the FDA was very slow, but this has significantly improved in the last few years with the advent of accelerated approval pathway. And I'll touch on that a little bit more when I discuss the projects. Examples of current active rare disease portfolio is represented largely by blood diseases, neurologic conditions, and blood cancers, as I mentioned earlier. Some were funded in the discovery stage and many during translation, and some progressed to the clinical stage. We also get rare disease applications for the clinical stage only. So, but the progression events have been helpful for us to keep track of the project's progress. Our portfolio of rare diseases covers conditions that affect all ages, including babies, toddlers, adolescents, and adults. And luckily, we live in an era where the state-of-the-art technologies are really invested into many of these programs. And that's the advantage both of the world, the grantees, and the patients. Some are advancing towards registration and potential approval. Again, the remainder of my presentation will cover a status report of specific rare disease projects, some of which you may be familiar with, and describe briefly what they've achieved. I'm going to start by sharing the grants where the treatment of the babies takes place when the baby is in the womb. Cell therapy for spina bifida has been pioneered by Dr. Diana Farmer of UC Davis. Spina bifida is a condition that happens when the neural tube does not close all the way in the womb, often resulting in damage to the spinal cord and nerves and resulting in the baby's paralysis, especially the legs. The team is using bank placental mesenchymal cells on an FDA-approved amniotic membrane patch as a treatment. This has been really innovative and very encouraging. The results so far also suggest that. This pilot trial is in progress, is enrolling well, the total of 6 patients. I thought we all thought you'd enjoy seeing baby Toby at his 3-month exam with mom, Michelle, and dad, Jeff. And obviously the 3 of them look happy. The second in utero program includes evaluation of cell therapy for alpha thalassemia major, which is a genetic disorder of hemoglobin synthesis that is fatal without intervention. Most prevalent in individuals from Southeast Asia, China, and the Middle East. The approach is to replace the baby's cells with the undesired gene with the mama's healthy cells. The project thus includes transplanting the mother's blood stem cells into the fetus. The interim results indicate the approach is safe. As you know, many are always concerned about in utero therapies or treatments, but for this approach, Dr. T.P. McKenzie has done a great job in managing the safety of that effort, and it's feasible with preliminary early evidence of tolerance. By the way, Dr. T.P. McKenzie is from UCSF. Advances in treatment in the severe combined immunodeficiency syndrome, also called the bubble baby, have progressed very well. And really, this is an area that has flourished very nicely with the advent of all the molecular new tools. 4 different skin diseases are shown on the slide. The therapies are using gene correction and autologous therapy. All received accelerated designations by the FDA. Again, that was really to the advantage of those 4 programs and the children. So the one you hear most about is the ADA SCID, which is adenosine deaminase SCID. The investigator and the hero of that program is Dr. Don Cohn of UCLA. He was able to get durable restoration of the immune system for over 2 years and he treated 50 patients. Evie, the one you see flying in that picture, is one of the first infants to get the treatment. She is now 11 years old and living a normal life. The next is XKID, which is a grant that was awarded to Dr. Gottschalk from St. Jude in collaboration with Dr. Cowan from UCSF. The interim results and the clinical data show that those children are now having normal T cells and NK cells, and those cells are important for fighting off infections. Aged patients have been followed, 16 months median follow-up. Ronnie and I think Jasion is the name of the young baby there, baby boy, look very happy and healthy. They are actually, and leading a normal life. The third program is the Artemis KID. The investigators are Dr. Mort Cowan again and Jennifer Puck of UCSF with promising results with 13 patients. The Artemis KID is prevalent in the Navajo children, and Drs. Puck and Mort actually visit the Navajo children once a year and visit with the ones who treated and potentially to recruit new ones. So you see here Dr. Hatali, I'm sorry, you see the patient Hatali, and she again looks happy and growing as a normal child. The last program is leukocyte adhesion deficiency, which is being developed by Rocket Pharma in collaboration again with Dr. Don Cohn of UCLA. The program completed enrollment of 9 patients and is actually preparing for a biologics license application filing. And that's the step that the FDA and the grantee work together so as to allow the program to go to potential registration to the market. Marley is one of those patients who received this treatment and is also doing well. You see, again, she's happy and waving in this picture. Now we move to CAR-T immunotherapy for treatment of gliomas. The work is being done by Dr. Crystal Mackel and her Stanford colleagues. And the program deals with 2 types of gliomas. These are tumors of the brain or cancer of the brain that affect children and young adults and can be almost universally fatal. The study is investigating the safety, feasibility, route of delivery of this CAR-T treatment. And especially in this case, the dose of the CAR-T. 3 of the 4 patients showed clinical and radiographic improvements. Toxicities are manageable and reversible with supportive care. The responding young ones, Dr. Crystal Mackel, actually are able to participate in daily life. Some are joining their families on outings, like going to the park or to a family gathering. The next indication is gene therapy for cystinosis, where the amino acid cysteine accumulates in the tissues and forms crystals that cause harm to the tissue. The patients are in pain. Dr. Stephanie Cherky of UC San Diego is the PI. The grant is for conducting a phase 1/2 clinical trial where the gene for cystinosin is provided so the cysteine does not accumulate. The project progressed from discovery to CLIN1 and then to CLIN2. Interim results on the first 3 patients are shown on the slide. There's sustained engraftment for over 1 year and more. Oral medication no longer required, and reduced cysteine crystals in the skin and in the intestines. No adverse events were unrelated to this drug product. The trial is active and enrolling. I wanted to mention to you the patient Jordan, as you see him here smiling with Dr. Cherky. What has been curious about Jordan is that he had an unexpected side effect with the trial. They observed that his blonde hair changed to become a brunette. He now has dark hair. And we're kind of curious what's the mechanism of that side effect? And Dr. Cherky is moving forward to understand that as well. As you know, we've been funding sickle cell projects. 4 of them are presented on this slide. Each of the clinical trials uses a different approach. And I just wanted to remind all of us that CIRM welcomes multiple shots on goal, because the patients deserve to get whatever works for them. The investigators are Dr. Porteous of Stanford. Was funded by CIRM at the preclinical stage. The clinical trial is funded by Graphite Bio. He's doing gene correction with viral vector and using CRISPR. There are 3 clinical trials currently in our portfolio in the area of sickle cell. Dr. Don Cohn of UCLA, again, pioneered that work, and he's using genetic modification with a different viral vector. And here you see Evie James Jr., again, doing well. He's age 29. The photo was taken 2 years post-transplant. And you look, he is happy. Per the CIRM and NHLBI partnership, we have 3 clinical grants that have been funded by this partnership. Dr. Mark Walters of UCSF Benioff Children's Hospital, he received a CLIN1 grant to conduct IND-enabling studies so he can go on to start a clinical trial. And then the CLIN2 grant for his phase 1 trial. He's following a non-viral delivery using CRISPR. Then Dr. Williams, David Williams from Boston Children's Hospital, conducting a phase 2 trial, again with Dr. Walters being his partner on this work. The project approach is centered on maintaining fetal hemoglobin in the adult. Interestingly enough, fetal hemoglobin prevents sickling. So he's using RNA to suppress or silence the gene that represses fetal hemoglobin expression. Both Dr. Williams and Dr. Walters' grants are relatively early in the conduct of their trials. Now we move to also adults who suffer from eye diseases. So cell therapy for retinitis pigmentosa was pioneered by Dr. Henrik Claassen of UC Irvine for adults inflicted with this disease. Dr. Claassen is a classic model for us. He received several grants from Discovery Disease Team Awards, two clinical grants, with the last one for repeat administration after a 1-year follow-up. The phase 1/2 clinical trial of 35 patients with repeat administration is completed, and there have been no safety issues with that trial. So if the patient needs more than 1 treatment, it appears based on the 35 patients that it's not going to be a problem. You see a photo here of Rosie Barrero, is one of the first patients who received only 1 injection of this therapy. Rosie now can see her kids. She became, with retinitis pigmentosa, it progresses slowly as a young adult, and by like mid-20s, you no longer can have a good eyesight. At age 26, I think she was given the treatment, and she was able to see her kids after that for the first time and able to drive a car. The J-site received the accelerated designation RMET from the FDA. And remember what I said, that accelerated designations help the grantee and the project to continue consultation with the FDA on a regular basis regarding their progression. The phase 2 study identified a biomarker for potential responders that is going to be helpful for the design of the next trial, which is likely to be the registration trial for this project. And the design of that next trial is actually in progress. Gene therapy for Parkinson's disease, a disease that's close to my heart and some of the board members' heart. a phase 1b trial that's guided using MRI for delivering a neurotrophic factor gene for stimulating regeneration of dopamine-producing neurons in the appropriate site in the brain called the putamen. The trial is designed, the study involved 2 cohorts, mild and moderate disease. Preliminary results with 11 of the 12 patients show that the treatment is well tolerated, and the 2 cohorts that were treated, one of them with a mild cohort, they have stability of the motor course. And then for the moderate cohort, the benefit is very obvious in daily living and in the motor outcomes. So advancing this portfolio is a dynamic process that engages all of us, CIRM, the grantees, patient representatives, as well as external experts that we recruit that specialize in the different areas of that we are studying. We do that through this clinical advisory panels, which we call CAPS. We've conducted 356 CAPS since 2016. We engaged 91 external advisors and 68 patient representatives. The patient representatives are hard to find, and some of them actually then overlap for a couple of projects. And we're very grateful for that. The question you might ask us, do CAPS really make a difference? And let me tell you, the simple answer is yes. How do we measure that? We measure that by documenting the challenges and then looking at the outcomes over time. So some of the outcomes that we look at have indicated that, for example, manufacturing challenges have been overcome, clinical trial design was optimized, enrollment enhanced, and the regulatory advice that's provided consistent with what they hear with the FDA and even sometimes advancing them further. And then partnering is facilitated. And the development path overall, especially for those who get CAPS, because we do CAPS for CLIN 1 and CLIN 2, and now we do TAPS, which is translation advisory panels for programs that are in the translation stage. So far, the CAP advice impacted 75% of our clinical awards. I'm going to stop now and leave you with a photo of Healthy Evie enjoying surfing. She's really a poster child for the ADA skin and has done very well. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Anne Marie has her hand raised, GT.
Maria? Oh, Anne Marie, sorry. Anne Marie, yes.
Great. Abla, congratulations. It's a remarkable presentation, and it's great for us to truly hear a more specific update than what we get generally. Thank you for taking the time to put together this presentation, but more importantly, thank you to you and the entire CIRM and beyond for all the work that this represents. So I just wanted to clarify one thing. What you presented is the result of the collective effort of Prop 71 and Prop 14. That's right. It's obviously the entire era of CIRM, clearly. My questions are how the alpha clinics have helped, or what has been the role of alpha clinics? That's question number one. And number two, we see particularly with the retinitis pigmentosa project that we're really quite close to finally a registrational or phase 3 trial, which is absolutely remarkable. Are there other projects that are getting close to this critical stage? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anne Marie. So the question regarding the alpha clinics are our partners. Many of the programs that I've mentioned are run at the alpha clinics as well. So the way it works, the alpha clinics manager, Jeff Lomax, works with us in having the programs presented to the alpha clinics directors and they agree on how are they going to collaborate in advancing these programs together with CIRM. And so it's up to, again, the PIs who actually are awarded the grants to work closely with the alpha clinics, but the relationship is very synergistic and has produced great outcome for both sides. And as far as the Proposition 71 and 14, you're correct. This is all an outcome of all that. For the retinitis pigmentosa program, it is the closest to potential registration for adults like that. We have a couple of others, but they're at a stage not ready yet to share because of the fact that they're still in discussions either with the FDA, et cetera. And so we opted to go with the ones who have publicly shared with us that information.
Thank you very much. Congrats again.
Thank you.
Fred?
I want to echo everything Anne-Marie said and add that being part of an organization that's doing such great work is really fulfilling, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. A question at this week's grant review subcommittee was related to the benchmark that's in the Prop 71 legislation regarding the investment in neurodegenerative diseases. And I noted on the slide that you referenced 22%, I think, of the projects were neuro projects, but we didn't see the measurement in terms of the percentage of funding, so that as a board, we can be tracking our commitment to invest a minimum of, I think it was 20 or 25%. And I think periodically, and I apologize if I missed that, but I think periodically I agree with the questioner yesterday. I don't want to attribute it to anyone because I might not be clear, but or maybe you're going to show it to me right now. In terms of the dollars and how we're measuring up to the commitment for that spending benchmark, if that's clear.
Yeah, again, thank you for the question, Mr. Fisher. So I may have not said this, but out of the 14 grants, clinical grants that have been awarded since Proposition 14 passed, 35% of them, 5 of the 14 are in neuro. And so we're advancing the neuro at a faster pace, or where many more grants are coming in the neuro area for us, especially since the proposition passed. As far as the amount of dollars that we spent on that, I actually don't have the number right now, but happy to bring it or get it for you.
Thanks. I think that since it's specifically spelled out in the Prop 14 language, the dollars that would be spent on neuro, I think periodically the board getting an update on where we are in terms of meeting that benchmark or exceeding it would be important to know. And credit to, I don't know if it was David or who it was the other day that raised this issue, but thank you.
Yeah, again, as Dr. Milan will mention to you again, is that our highest focus is really neuro. And with the fact that now we have the funds, again, with your approval, we will continue to advance to, bringing in new grants to CIRM is actually a collaborative effort, with us talking to investigators outside CIRM and universities and companies to encourage them to apply. And that relationship is being fostered with all of the folks in the state of California, as well outside the state of California. So we're relatively confident that we will be bringing in more clinical grants in the area of neuro. By the way, when we think of neuro, we don't only think of clinical, we think of discovery, translation, and clinical. And when you put all those numbers together, I think my recollection is that I think we may have spent $720,000, sorry, $720 million on, I don't count in millions as a normal person. So $720 million has been spent on neuro thus far. Anything else regarding that, Mr. Fisher?
Abla, if I may, Chairman
Please.
Thomas, may I
Yes, please.
comment on this? So I think that's an extremely important question. And we have been taking that particular topic to a variety of kind of internal strategy moves. One of them is to determine how they're going to be, how we are going to not just promote the numbers of neuro programs coming in, but how these can be organized to empower and essentially, create kind of a multiplier effect of the programs we funded toward future efforts. And so you'll be hearing more about that at upcoming meetings as this, we call it a neuro sub-strategy is being developed internally by the team. But secondly, just more concretely, we will be reporting on the dollar amounts in our annual report. We do track it. We track it according to our budgetary planning and expenditures. And that also, guides how we organize our programs and how we work with our review team and others in terms of what can we do with our standard program opportunities to make sure that we are attracting programs in neuro and it's not only CNS, but also psychiatry and mental health. We're trying to incorporate that in kind of holistically across our programs to make sure that we can bring in those types of programs. But in the upcoming year or two, we should have enough information to do a more fulsome report back to the board in terms of where we are, what we're planning to do. And just to let you know, it's definitely, in the middle of our dashboard. It's very prominent in how we're planning our scientific programs.
Thank you. Judy and then David.
David was first, I'm sorry.
Oh, David, then Judy.
Okay, it doesn't matter. Either way, I think this discussion proves that if you wait long enough, your question will be answered by all the questions that come before you. So everybody's done a phenomenal job of giving Abla, I think, the right questions, and she's giving us the right answers. So I'm not going to talk too much. The question I had, and I'll ask one question, make one comment. The question I had is, historically, neuro programs, whether they be clinical or discovery or whatever, have always been underrepresented as to what we would like to have and what sort of represents the diseases out in the community. That's true across the board. That's not a CIRM thing. But what I'm wondering is, and you can pass on this question, Abla, if you like, is what are we doing differently than we would have done 5 years ago to try to enrich our portfolio in neuro programs across the board? I imagine you have an answer for that, so I'm not too worried about it. But before you answer that, I'm just going to do a public service for everybody, because what we do at CIRM is so important. But let me put it into context. Chula Vista is the last community on the California coast before you go into Mexico. So it's a large city. It's 175, 200,000 people. They are building a phenomenal complex of a new 1,400 room hotel, 5,000 new employees, parks, marinas. It's going to be the last in the golden, the crown in the development of the coastline. And it was a very big deal because this is the last thing we're ever going to do in humanity, and how we're going to spend it. Their budget from soup to nuts is $1.3 billion. So just put that in perspective. That's less than we will spend on neuro programs through the life of CIRM. So I just wanted to emphasize how important what we do is, and how compared to what other things cost and other things deliver, we are good value for your money for taxpayers. Anyway, enough said.
So, David, I understand what you are advocating for and understand the importance of neuro. I think Dr. Milan mentioned a couple of strategies that we're taking.
Yes.
We're developing consortia, or we'd like to develop consortia that deal with neurological diseases that are not but just by ourselves, with a lot of other potential opportunities. And then the other would be also the design of the trials where I sit. We've been discussing the potential of doing basket trials, umbrella trials in neuro, which award us the benefit of testing modalities in a more rapid manner for various neurological diseases. And so we heard you, we are thinking and would like to implement as soon as possible. But we think collectively through Dr. Milan's leadership is that CIRM cannot be an island. It has to connect with all the folks who are working in this area in all of our pillars, and we can figure out together what it's going to take to move neuro to the next stage and to treat as many of those. And you see them see neuro patients as happy as the ones like the skid babies. So we are determined to actually figure out how to get there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Judy?
I just wanted to endorse what Maria Milan just said. Under Prop 71, we were able to fund neurodegenerative disorders, and many of the studies that we've been talking about today, I believe, are in areas like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. And what's new about Prop 14 is the $1.5 billion that is really earmarked for CNS and psychiatric disorders, including addiction, depression, bipolar, schizophrenia, and some of those disorders. And so I'm very excited to hear that we can all work together to come up with a way to have a real impact in these diseases, which are very devastating to families and are also very much unequally represented in underserved communities for a variety of reasons. So I think this is really important. Thank you, Maria, for your comments.
Okay, any other hands raised here?
We have
Al, yes.
I would be remiss as the patient advocate representing mental health not to enthusiastically say thank you to Judy for her leadership as a member of this board, always in the area of CNS and for people being affected by psychiatric disorders such as schizophrenia and other affective disorders that she indicated. And to say to staff that I have the unique privilege of working with people from underrepresented, underserved communities and understand their hope for a cure. And I know that sometimes that those phrases seem almost inconceivably unreachable, but they are reachable because, as again, David said, this is a wonderful organization with very talented people that are very committed to this purpose. I enthusiastically endorse you bringing back regular reports on not only how the funds are being allocated, but the effectiveness of some of the grants associated with CNS and psychiatric disorders.
Thank you, Al. Let's see, Marv.
And I just wanted to enthusiastically support what Judy and Al have just said. I think this is really a crucial area and we need to really keep our focus there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, members of the board? Abla, I don't see any up there. Maria, do you see any others?
No.
Okay. Abla, thank you very much for that presentation. I think it's indicative of the best-in-class work that the entire CIRM family has enabled and it is a real beacon of hope to patients for all those conditions, as well as the many others for which we have funded research. So congratulations to the team. I just wanted to make one comment, which is I didn't want the discussion of caps to pass without comment. One of the things, the many things that CIRM does that separates it from other major grant-making entities in the space is the involvement that CIRM has throughout the, in this case, clinical trial processes of the various projects. Most grant-making agencies give awardees their funds and say, congratulations, best of luck, and there is little to no follow-up. The caps are a major change from the norm, and is something, as Abla discussed, allows for projects to be enhanced midstream and to give them a better shot of success. And that is a major differentiator among several for what we do in the process that we have in place. So Abla and Maria, congratulations on all of that. 356 caps, a lot of caps over the last 6 years, and the results are clear. So I just wanted to elaborate a bit for the board on that.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Senator Torres.
Yes, I just wanted to add my thanks to Maria and to Abla. I've worked very closely with Abla on a number of issues, especially in the neurological field. But also we owe a debt of gratitude to Bob Klein. This was included because of his insistence that neurological diseases needed to be highlighted within the initiative. So when Prop 14 was being drafted, he really took a courageous stand because it was not a unanimous decision among the scientists that we should carve out a specific area for neurological diseases, and 1.5 billion, as David has just said, is fantastic. But again, a thank you to Bob Klein.
Thank you, Art. Pat?
Yeah. Probably what I'm going to say is unpopular. I don't know, but I've been working. I'm an active neuroscientist and doing research on schizophrenia and autism and other disorders of the nervous system for a very long period of time because I'm old. And some of you may or may not remember, but back in 1995, during the decade of the brain, Jerry Fishbach, who was head of NINDS at that time, went to Congress making promises about curing Parkinson's disease in 5 or 6 years, as long as there was an increase in funding. So I give it as an example. I love the enthusiasm, and of course, I think this is a really important area, and I think that the program folks, I think, have some really great plans about encouraging more applications, higher quality, that are really going to try to address what has been probably the biggest biomedical challenge we face. The brain is complicated, and the diseases of the brain and the nervous system in general are quite complicated, which is why we don't have cures. And we've been working on this for 60 plus years or more with modern science. So I just say this, that we be enthusiastic, but remember how we communicate this, that we don't want to build a bridge too far and suggest that we are on the verge of being able to come up with great approaches to curing X, Y, and Z. I say that because, and I know Jerry Fishbach well, and I knew him for a long time, but that what he said, and there are others who did the same thing, did damage to the funding of areas like this at the NIH. And I just want us to be confidently cautious about how we communicate what we're doing in this area, meeting the goals of the proposition, which I'm enthusiastic about. What I heard today was fantastic. So I'm a big supporter, but we have to communicate this in a tempered way, because this is not cancer. This is really cancer is complicated. This is a different degree of complication.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, please go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I just like to second that, and I won't reiterate everything he said, but I'd like to call people's attention to the organization that's very well funded by Randy Scheckman here at UC Berkeley, has Parkinson's Now, and the premise there is that we need more basic research and that without real basic research, we're still sort of fumbling around. It reminds me personally of what happened with the war on cancer that Nixon launched. It took almost a decade and a half before we actually understood what oncogenes and tumor suppressors were. And there are some, aside from the complexities of the brain that we just heard about from an expert, I think that there are indications that somatic mutations may occur in stem cells in the brain in processes that sort of mimic what happens in cancer. And until we understand that the genetic component, we may be sort of grappling with a complexity that we just can't fathom now. So I think it's important for us to fund this kind of stuff in basic research as well as clinical applications.
Thank you, Mike, and Pat, for your cautionary remarks. I think we go to great lengths to not overstate anything that we think we're going to be able to do. We're very careful about that, and we report the progress on projects as it comes without hyperbole. And I don't think anybody for a second doubts the complexity in the neurospace or in many of the other spaces we're dealing with. This is really tough stuff, which is why we're involved in it. So, but thank you very much for those remarks. Any other comments? Okay, Maria, does that conclude the president's report?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
We're asking this, Maria, right?
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. And again, congratulations to the team. Thank you, Abla, for an excellent presentation. We're going to go now into, I'm going to skip the consent items, put that towards the end. We're going to go into the action items. I want to note in advance, have a bit of an anomaly. We have the good fortune at 11 o'clock on the nose to have Senator Anthony Portantino, who's going to be addressing item number 10, SB 987, calling in at that moment. So whatever we're doing at 11 o'clock, we will cut to Senator Torres and Senator Portantino. So I just wanted to alert everybody to that. So now we're going to go into the application review subcommittee for item number 6 on the action agenda, which is, I'll make sure I get the phrasing here, consideration of applications submitted in response to clinical trial stage projects, program announcement, CLINS 1 or 2. We're going to have a presentation on this item by Dr. Sombrano. Gil?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me put up this presentation. Good morning, everyone. So as mentioned, I'm going to present the recommendations from last month's grants working group review of clinical applications. Just a quick reminder of our mission. I know you already saw this, but just to note that we also present this during our grants working group meetings, just to make sure that everybody going even into the review is on the same page as to what we're striving to do at CIRM. This is a reminder of the clinical budget status. To note that we have started a new fiscal year, so we are kind of having a fresh start here with 169 million allocated to the clinical program. So the amount requested today with the 2 applications would be 7.8 million if approved, would leave us about 154 million in that budget. The scientific scoring system that is used to assess these applications is based on a scale of 1, 2, or 3. Score of 1 means that an application has exceptional merit and warrants funding. Score of 2 needs improvement, and typically those go back to the applicant for revisions, come back to the grants working group over a couple of months period to reassess. Those that get a score of 3 are sufficiently flawed that they kind of need to go back to the drawing board, and we won't accept those back for at least 6 months. The review criteria that are utilized to come up with then that score of 1, 2, or 3 are based on these 5 questions. First, does the project hold the necessary significance and potential for impact, meaning what value it is offering, and is the rationale sound? Is the project well planned and designed, and is it feasible, including whether they have an appropriate qualified team and all the resources to carry out the project? And then the 5th question is, does the project address the needs of underserved communities? The grants working group itself has a composition that includes different roles. So we do have the scientific grants working group members that are appointed by the board, all ex-California individuals, meaning outside of California. They conduct the scientific evaluation. They bring in expertise from a variety of areas, from disease, clinical, regulatory, CMC, and so on. And they provide the scientific score that you see on these applications. But as part of the grants working group, we also have our patient advocate and nurse members who are also members of the ICOC. And their role is to conduct the DEI evaluation, provide a patient perspective on the impact, significance of the projects, and also just provide oversight on the review process itself. So these members provide a DEI score on all of the applications that you will see in the summaries that were provided. And during the review, they also provide a suggested scientific score. We also have scientific specialists who participate. These are non-voting members with scientific areas of expertise that help us fill in gaps when we need. They provide an initial but not final scientific score during the course of the review. All right, so that serves as background. This is a slide just to remind all board members who have conflicts of interest with the 2 applications that we are considering today, as shown here, the CLIN2, which is a clinical trial grant, and then the CLIN1, which is a proposal for IND enabling studies. So just take a note of that and remember that you are recused from speaking on these applications. So the first application to be considered is CLIN2 13267. The title of this application is Phase 1 Treatment of Urethral Strictures in Humans. So this therapy is an engineered scaffold with cells made from autologous progenitor cells that include smooth muscle and urothelial cells. And the indication is for patients that have long urethral strictures that can't be treated with current methods. The goal is to complete a phase 1 clinical trial to assess safety and feasibility of this approach. The funds requested is $3.8 million for this program. So a little background on stricture disease or the occurrence of strictures. These can occur for a variety of reasons. Some are congenital, some may be due to disease or traumatic injury, but they can have a profound effect on the quality of life of individuals, resulting in infection, bladder stones, fistula, sepsis, and potentially renal failure. The value proposition for this proposed therapy, the current standard of care for the long segment strictures, includes an internal urethrotomy, urethroplasty, and reconstruction that uses grafts or vascularized flaps. And the stricture recurrence is and along with infections and other complications are quite common using these techniques, particularly for those long strictures. And so this proposed therapy offers the potential for a lifelong cure for those strictures and eliminates the complications that are associated with existing therapies. Why is this a stem cell or gene therapy project? Well, this utilizes urothelial and muscle progenitor cells as part of the manufacturing process to create these grafts. Our portfolio has very little in terms of projects that are similar to this. So this is just a representation of our active portfolio projects. The closest thing we have is a translational project that is focused on urinary incontinence that uses iPSC-derived smooth muscle cells to transplant into the urethra muscle to regenerate the weak urethra. And so that's the closest thing we have. Otherwise, there's nothing specifically for urethral strictures in our portfolio. And this particular applicant has not previously received a CIRM award. So the recommendation from the grants working group for this application is a score of 1, with all members giving it a score of 1 and no one giving it a score of 2 or 3. The DEI score had a median score of 7. And the CIRM team recommendation is to fund in concurrence with the grants working group recommendation for $3.8 million. So I will pause here for any questions and approval. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Gil. Do we have a motion to approve?
I move.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Al. Questions or comments from members of the board? Hearing none, any questions or comments from the public? Or comments from the public, I should say.
There are no hands raised, JT.
Okay, thank you very much. Maria, will you please call the roll?
Dan Bernal, Leandra Clark Harvey,
Yes.
Anne Marie Dulege,
Yes.
Mark Fisher Colbury, Mark, are you on the line? You're on mute. I see you, but I think you're on mute. Okay, we'll come back. Fred Fisher.
Yes.
Sorry about that. That's an aye from Mark Fisher Colbury. My apologies.
Thank you, Mark. David Higgins. David, you're on mute. I will come back to you, David, but I think you nodded your head yes. So I'm going to say, yep, and I see your thumb. Okay, great. Rich Lahara.
Yes.
Lauren Miller Rogan.
Yes.
Thank you. Adriana Padilla.
Yes.
Joe Panetta. Al Rolette.
Yes.
Marvin Southard.
Yes.
Jonathan Thomas.
Yes.
Carol Watson. The motion carries.
Thank you very much, Maria. Gil, any other comments?
No, just the next application.
Okay, thank you. Please proceed.
All right, thank you. So the next application is CLIN 1-13315. And so this application, just to note, was previously presented to the application review subcommittee a couple of months ago in April. And so although it did receive a score of 1 and why it was being presented, the votes were pretty close and split, with 8 voting for a score of 1 and 7 members scoring for a score of 2 out of the grants working group. It also had a relatively low DEI score. And so the application review subcommittee requested that the applicants revise their application and that the grants working group reevaluate those revisions before it comes back to the application review subcommittee. So we have taken it through that process. The grants working group has looked at it again. So I will review the summary of what occurred with those revisions. So the title of this application then is hematopoietic stem cell gene therapy for X-linked chronic granulomatous disease, XCGD. It is an autologous therapy that is being proposed to correct the gene defect in hematopoietic stem cells. And of course, the indication is for CGD patients. This is a rare disease that probably occurs only in about 10 patients per year, or at least that's the estimate. Their goal is to complete IND enabling studies and submit their IND. The funds requested is just under 4 million, with co-funding provided by the applicant of just under $1 million. Let's go on to the next. Okay, so some background on XCGD. This is a rare, as mentioned, immune disorder that prevents white blood cells from essentially killing foreign invaders. And so this results in a very severe recurrent infections that impact quality of life and the length of the patient's life. This condition is usually diagnosed before age 5, but without treatment, children may die before the age of 10. So the value proposition for the proposed therapy, current standard of care involves just ongoing antibacterial, antifungal prophylaxis, and allogeneic hematopoietic stem cell transplant. So the allogeneic transplant can be curative, but it also comes with many side effects, including graft versus host disease and other complications. So if successful, the proposed therapy does offer patients the potential for immune restoration and a cure. The project is a stem cell or gene therapy because the therapy itself is composed of gene-modified hematopoietic stem cells. Other projects in our active CIRM portfolio that are similar, we do have a clinical trial project supporting a phase 1/2 trial for XCGD that uses autologous gene-corrected CD34 positive cells. And the mechanism is similar lentiviral vector correction of the gene defect. The team that is funded to do this work overlaps with the team of the current proposal. So this new proposal is sort of a next generation therapy that uses the lenti vector approach for this. This particular applicant, because they are coming in as a new entity, has not previously received a CIRM award, but as mentioned, some of the members that are involved in the project certainly have. The recommendation from the grants working group, and I'm going to show you here a comparison basically between the current grants working group vote, where it received a unanimous score of 1 by 15 members, compared to the previous grants working group where it had received 8 versus 7 votes. So a unanimous score of 1. It also received a DEI score of 7. The previous DEI score had been a 5.5, so improvement on both accounts. And so the CIRM team recommendation is to fund this proposal in concurrence with the recommendation from the grants working group.
And we recognize that a lot more work is needed to.
And for the award amount of 3.999 million. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Gil. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved. This is Al Roulette.
Thank you, Al. Second?
Second.
Okay, I think David got in there first. Thank you very much. Comments or questions from members of the board? Henry.
Framing.
Yes.
Whereas up until now,
somebody's, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Henry.
Can you give us a bit more of your perspective and that of your team about an application that was sub-optimal to begin with, is coming is slightly better, but still, sort of average? What's going on there? Thank you.
So the application, at least from the scientific perspective, I think came back much stronger. I mean, there was a unanimous score of 1 from the grants working group members. The DEI score moved up to a 7, so it's certainly not a 10. I think I would maybe request some of our board members who were there, if they want to speak to some of the rationale behind not achieving a perfect score in terms of the DEI.
Al, were you going to speak to that issue by any chance?
I will certainly attempt to. First, I will assert that the DEI score, initial DEI score, did influence the outcome of this application. And so I'll pause and anecdotally, and I'll take the criticism later, say, Isabel, that's just for you. But we got the message, and the GWG really is beginning to appreciate the significance and importance of DEI as it pertains to underrepresented, underserved communities. More importantly, I think staff has done a very good job at providing us with a rubric that eliminates subjective scoring, and it affords us with a way to objectively score the applications. And when you say that to the scientific evaluators, I am from the opinion of one, they get it. And so from the DEI perspective, moving from a 5.5 to a 7 may not be monumental. However, a 5.5 initially is not fundable. And that, again, is how I appreciated this part of the process.
Thank you, Al. Isabel.
Thanks, Al, for your perspective. It is so critical to hear when you're sitting on those review boards and committees. I think, to me, over time, JT, is the observation that we don't have that many patient advocates on the committees, so that when there's 2 people scoring this, it really does weigh one way or the other for something. So, which is why I raised the issue, why does one say this is great and the other says it ain't? So it's almost as though you actually need a few more votes vis-a-vis the DEI plan. That's just an observation. Of course, it's not because I want more work and want to sit as a patient advocate, but I do believe that possibly weighs on those votes as well. And I'm glad to know that 2 patient advocates can have such a great deal of weight in this, and that the researchers are listening. It is so critical for inclusion and for moving this research into our communities to allow our communities also to participate. So I really appreciate it, and I appreciate the board as a whole taking this very seriously about the DEI, about us making shifts and changes. And I'd like you to know, from my vantage point, working nationally and across other organizations, boards, conversations where everybody is talking about DEI, I like to point to CIRM as one of those who is putting their money where our intention is. And I really, really do appreciate that we're showing and leading, I think, the way on what DEI inclusion looks like. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Isabel. Just as an aside, the grants working group has spots for up to 7 patient advocates, and we generally speaking have well more than 2, just so you know. But of course, if you'd like to be involved, feel free, by all means. So thank you, Al. Thank you, Isabel. I think it does underscore the seriousness with which we collectively approach the DEI issue, and it marks a fundamental shift. This was a bit of a watershed application, actually, where this was such an important factor in the decision making. And so I think that the jump from a 5.5 to a 7 is definitely an improvement, which is exactly what we wanted to see. I don't want to get lost in the wash that we went from an 8 to 7 on the science to a 15 to 0, which means that the process again is working in in that the GWG, when it deliberates, gives feedback to the applicants as to how to improve their application. And very clearly here, that was the case. And so we've ended up with, for the board's consideration, a better project all the way around, both scientifically and from a DEI perspective, which is exactly what we want. Yes, Fred.
Just for context, I'll add that I don't think I've seen a proposal that has received a score of 10. And so I think most often the DEI scores for proposals that are strong end up being in the 7 to 8. I don't even think I've seen consensus around the 9. So the current state of the art is 7 is probably in the 90th percentile. The staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but my recollection based on the proposals that I've reviewed. And so going from a 5.5 to a 7 is a strong step forward.
Thank you, Fred. Yes, Chris. Chris.
Thank you, Chairman Thomas. The other point I'd like to add to this conversation to thank the staff is that in our applications now, the DEI portion has been consolidated. And before it was sprinkled through the application. So we had to search for the information. And I think from the perspective of the nurse and patient advocates, as well as from the individuals who are writing the application, as well as the scientists who are reviewing them, having this information in a consolidated spot is really, really helpful. And I've been doing a fair number of these reviews, and I've seen, I perceive, and I'd be interested in other patient advocates commenting, a change in tone from the scientists who are reviewing the application, being much more appreciative of the DEI conversation that we have. And I really think that move by the staff to put everything in one place has enhanced all of our abilities to do a better job with this topic. So I'd like to say thank you for that.
Thank you, Chris. Anne Marie.
Yeah, I really welcome some guidance here. Appreciate all what has been said. I think it's great to improve, but we really should first judge on the quality of the science, the expertise of the team, and the DEI primarily. So from a quality of the science and the expertise of the team, is 7 good enough? I appreciate it's in 90th percentile, but I know that we've always strived for funding only the very best proposal, not the good proposal. So is it in the very best or in the good?
Any of the patient advocate members of the GWG wish to respond to Anne Marie's question? Fred.
Yeah, so going through the review process, I would say that 90+% of the discussion of a proposal is on the science. And it's really impressive as a non-physician, non-scientist to listen to that discussion. And those of us patient advocates that are assigned do our best to provide a DEI and patient perspective that lives up to the quality of the scientific review. And that's not easy. And part of what makes it hard is that the applicants have not yet figured out what inclusion and access of underserved populations in research really means. And so the weakest part of the proposal, when a proposal gets all ones, the science is super strong. And I can attest to that based on the impression I'm left with. But the work that the staff are doing to help the applicants understand what it means to include underserved populations in whether it's clinical trials or early stage discovery projects is something that it's clear the applicants don't really pay a lot of attention to because they're so focused on the science. And we are kind of imposing this new criteria that they are frankly really unfamiliar with. And so we can tell the challenge they have in responding to the questions. And I think the reviewers have gotten better at being less tolerant of the mediocre lip service kind of responses we often see. And I think the staff have done a great job in training the scientists who are doing the applications around what it means, and that paying lip service is very different than having a plan. And that's a common theme of our review process. So I think you can be confident that the science is great. I think we can be less confident that the inclusion of underserved communities and having a real robust plan to do that goes beyond, well, the catchment area of the facility is in a very diverse community, and therefore we're just going to assume that they're going to do it, or they're this very prestigious institution, that is in a diverse community, so they must have a real plan, or they must be able to attract people from underserved communities. I think we are no longer taking those leaps of faith and really holding people more accountable to a real plan around inclusion. So I don't think you have to be concerned that we aren't funding the best science, because the scientific reviewers that are coming in are amazing. And I think we're getting better at holding the applicants accountable for their DEI plan. Hopefully that made sense.
Thank you, Fred. Isabel and then Al.
Thank you, Fred, for laying that baseline. That is so critical, that we do hold researchers accountable. To some extent, it is not the best science, because without the inclusion of communities of color who have been historically under-researched, it can't be the best science, because it does not serve us all. So I always say, is it ethical, and is it moral, and does it serve all? So is it just science, JUST, justice science? That's where we're trying to get to. And I so appreciate it when folks like Fred lay that out. And there are those of us who have been talking about this for quite a while, and so appreciate your questions, Anne-Marie, because they're very critical. And I'm excited because I have been, from my Latino research friends, hearing this thing about checking the box and not holding researchers accountable. And that's what I see us doing here at CIRM. It's, and I'm so excited that we have embraced this, and that, as Fred said, and I think Al said, finally the researchers are starting to get it. We are bringing them to the church, and I am really excited. So Anne-Marie, yes, we keep bugging them and we keep asking for the perfect score. Once we get the perfect score, I guess I can go to heaven, because it's going to be a while till we get there. But thank you for, we need to keep that finger on the, whatever we keep the finger on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Isabel. Al?
I'll talk more specifically about the evolution of the patient advocate as it pertains to my own contributions on the GWG, Anne-Marie. That my scoring has become certainly more critical and refined. I agree with Fred that the scientific reviewers, when they score something on one, it is an amazing process to be a part of. And oftentimes, as a patient advocate, I don't comprehend all of the intricacies of the science and appreciate it when scientific reviewers pause and give a very detailed explanation. In the same way, as a patient advocate, I have more effectively described the impact on underserved and unserved communities, and that there's no impact when they're not considered or included. And that when we receive grants, no disrespect to any grant-making institution, that are predominantly platitudes, I now have an audience that is receptive to that. And a way to say that shifts the audience from thinking, oh, okay, it's not just about the science, but it's also about impacting the scientists who develop the proposals. And therein lies why a 7 is better than what we had initially, and we continue to move forward in getting better responses, because that is ultimately the goal. We want grant applicants to give us better responses.
Thank you, Al. Anne Marie, I would add that the whole process of incorporating DEI as a crucial criteria is evolving. And somewhat further to Fred's comments, because it's an evolving task, that the researchers, when they're proposing, are increasingly factoring that into what they submit. And so I think that no, it's not a 10, but it is indicative of the fact that it is, as we've said here, taken very seriously. Which is why, by the way, if you recall the discussion on this at the last, whenever it came up, the application review subcommittee, given the split on the science and the low DEI score, that I felt that this was really a good test case to drive home the importance of going back to the drawing board to elevate the attention paid, both in that case to the science and the DEI. And I think that this project is absolutely the better for the board's decision to send it back, and you've seen what the results are. So short answer, Anne Marie, the process proceeds apace. It's getting refined as we go along. The scores are improving, and it is now very clearly a central part of everybody's consideration, which is exactly where we wanted to be. So thank you to all.
Eddie, I just want to say, I really appreciate that the process is helping and that the CIRM team is doing something good and is influencing the matter. I also appreciate that the DEI team, or the effort on DEI, has resulted in improvement, but we're not yet there, and it will take some time, Isabel. We still need you for some time. I would say just one nuance here is that when it's in a super rare disease like this one, it's obviously more difficult to come with a practical proposal on DI as opposed to diabetes, even Parkinson for that matter. So I give them a little bit of an excuse in some ways to not being so creative. I've heard that the science is great. I heard that the DI is, I would say, good enough for now. I haven't heard if the team is the best team with expertise here. And Gil, I think if you had anything or anyone on the team, the expertise of people doing it besides the science, then I will feel fully comfortable voting yes.
Certainly. And so the team is, and even when it had the score of 8 to 7, that was never a concern. So these are probably, one of the world's experts in leading this kind of effort. The main concerns, just, for everybody's awareness in terms of what kind of caused the split originally, was in the amount of information that the applicants have provided related to the manufacturing process. So they didn't have a clear understanding of all the details so that they could properly comment. So a lot of those 2s were about, we really want more information from the applicants to give us more confidence that their manufacturing process is going to work out. So I think that was probably the overriding concern, which was resolved with the revision.
Mr. Chairman, if I may add, I first started raising this issue.
Art, you're conflicted on the motion.
You cannot speak.
Oh my God. I'm going to have to.
We still have a motion on the table.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to talk about DEI.
Okay, thank you. Leandra, do you have your hand up? No.
I do, thanks. I've had
Here
it
we
up for a
go.
bit. Just wanted to contribute and support comments that are made. You know, I think we have to remember that DEI is not always easy to measure, right? So you can measure diversity, the presence of others, right? You know, how diverse are the folks in the room? It comes down to a more nuanced understanding and appreciation of how cultural competence and integrity is really measured. That's hard. So for me, if folks are landing around a 6 or 7, I think that's great, because honestly, if someone was scoring a 10, that'd be a little suspect, because I think it's really difficult, and because it's such a continuum of progress and thinking and you know, effort. So I want us to keep that in mind as well. Different from other things that are easily, you know, measured. Is it there or is it not? DEI, equity, inclusion. I mean, the field is still in many ways emerging in itself. So I think we should give ourselves and our applicants a little grace on that end.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from members of the board? I think this has been a great discussion on a most important topic. So thank you everybody for your comments. Do we have any public comment on this application?
No.
Okay, Maria, will you please call the roll?
Dan Bernal, Leandra Clark Harvey,
Yes.
Anne Marie Dulege,
Yes.
Isabel Dudon,
Yes.
Mark Fisher Colbury,
Aye.
Fred Fisher,
Yes.
Elena Flowers,
Yes.
David Higgins,
Yes.
Steve Jules Guard, Rich Lahara,
Yes.
Christine Miskowski,
Yes.
Lauren Miller Rogan,
Yes.
Adriana Padilla,
Yes.
Joe Panetta El Roulette,
Aye.
Marvin Southard,
Yes.
Jonathan Thomas.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you very much. We have Beth, you get 3 minutes off. We have the next item is going to be number 10 when Senator Portantino calls in at 11 o'clock sharp. There's no point in starting one of the other topics at this point. So if we could just have everybody take about a 3-minute break, and we'll come back here with Senator Torres and Senator Portantino. And Art, please feel free when the senator's on the line to begin the discussion on that item number 10. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that great?
I should say, everybody, before Art starts here, that the conclusion of our discussion on the previous item concluded the business of the application review subcommittee, and we're now back to action items other than those involving the approval of any grants.
I think Anthony is on the line.
I am. Senator, how are you, sir?
Good. I'll let JT open up the meeting again when we're back in quorum.
Maria, are we good to go here?
Sure. Yeah, I think so.
Great. Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, I'm honored to introduce to you a very dear friend whose career I have followed throughout his tenure in the Assembly and in the State Senate. Anthony Portantino represents a lot of the areas where we provide funding, Caltech, JPL, as well as Warner Brothers and Disney. We don't provide funding there, but we certainly support their efforts. And the Claremont colleges, of course, and Caltech. What's also important about Senator Portantino is his unwavering leadership on gun control and raising the age of when you can buy a rifle or a gun, making sure that gun violence is signed in a bill by Senator Portantino, by Gavin Newsom just a few days ago, July 22nd, to provide for much more protections for us living in a society filled with gun violence, but also his tremendous leadership in mental health issues, some of which I worked with him on years ago, but also now even more so the leadership he's shown on that, plus the ability to raise issues related to cancer, and clearly, which brings us to this point, which is why I wanted him to be present to present his bill, SB 987, which I transferred and sent to each of the board members prior to today's meeting in the hopes that we can pass a motion that I will make after Senator Portantino's presentation to hopefully endorse this legislation, which is so important also to the working group of our affordability and accessibility issues, and quite frankly, the Office of Affordability, which the governor is proposing in the budget and will take effect January 1, 2023. So Senator, thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to see you.
It's a pleasure to see you, my old friend. And before I go to business, I had dinner with one of your old staffers, Dana Hobart, the other night, and he wanted me to say hello and send his regards to you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And I'm a big fan of Senator Torres, and, you know, he represented a big chunk of where I represent now, and been a good friend and mentor, and happy to be here and see all the good work that you're all doing. And Leandra, my buddy's here too. We partner on a lot of mental health stuff. And so it's good to see you. And obviously Tara McGee, my legislative director, is on the call with us, and I get all the credit and get the microphone, but she does all the work. So it's a good.
Also, I forgot to thank you for the work you did with the Gordon Moore Foundation, and I did with our previous vice chair, to establish and bring in scientists into the legislature through the Gordon Moore Foundation and other funding, so that these science fellows are much a part of your legacy as well. So we actually have scientists in the room being able to answer the questions of legislators as they review legislation.
Absolutely. And I have a neuroscientist in my office, one of the fellows this year, PhD in neuroscience, and she's doing great work and loving being a policy person. So it's been a great addition to the discourse in the Capitol. Obviously, you all know we've got major challenges in healthcare. You know, the pandemic highlighted things we all knew. You know, there were major disparities in access to care, and in particular, you know, access to the top cancer clinical trials, research, hospitals, centers of excellence. By the way, I put my City of Hope background behind me. You know, obviously got to show my colors for the district that I represent. I had the Rose Bowl, and at the last minute I said, you know, let me switch it to City of Hope. And so when I was asked, you know, last year we did the Cancer Patients Bill of Rights. Senator Rubio carried that resolution, which, you know, sort of set the framework for wanting to make sure that, you know, cancer patients from across California, from across socioeconomic strata, have a Bill of Rights. And so this year we're going to take that concept and put it into practice and allow, you know, Medi-Cal patients access to the best care in the state of California. And so that's essentially what 987 does. The health plans have removed their opposition. You know, the biggest change, I think, is they can no longer self-refer. There has to be a referral. But the access piece is the heart and soul of the bill. And we want to make sure that, you know, and again, if any of us have a loved one that has cancer, you don't want somebody to say, oh, no, you can't go to that hospital, or no, you can't have access to that treatment based on other factors. And so we want everyone to have access to the best care available in their region. And at the heart of the bill, that's what it does. And so, obviously all of the work and funding and research that you all, make happen turns into these trials and treatment. And so we want to make sure that your good work gets in the right patient's, agenda, so we can cure and save more lives. Because it doesn't make any sense to be funding and supporting all of this research, but say only a segment of Californians have access to it.
That's
And
very
so fundamentally, that's what we're doing.
That's very well put. In fact, that was a previous discussion we were having in terms of reaching out to underserved communities led by many of our patient advocates on the board. Are there any questions from members of the board? Well, I would like to, if not, I would like to move that we support SB 987 and its passage to the legislature. And I know that once the governor receives it, he'll sign it.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Lots of seconds.
Okay, Art, you want me to take this from here?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. And Senator, thank you very much for your hard work and dedication and for joining us here today on this most important matter. Questions, comments, or members of the board? Isabel.
Sorry, I didn't raise my hand fast enough, but I did want to say that the Latino Cancer Institute has been one of the supporters of SB 987, and we're particularly completely glad that the senator looked at the Medi-Cal patient population, because these are oftentimes the folks with the least access, the late detection, and therefore the disproportionate mortality rate, because they don't have access to this quality care and advanced science. And so I'm really excited that we're giving them through SB 987 the opportunity to access comprehensive cancer centers for some of the more advanced kinds of diagnostics and care. So my agency has supported this. I don't know if that causes conflict for me with CIRM or supporting CIRM to do this, but I just wanted to put that out there very clearly.
This does not involve any funding, so you're in good shape, Isabel. Thank you. Leandra.
Yeah, I just want to also call out that, this is so important, not just for physical health, but also for behavioral health too. And there's often, when you look at folks that are on medical enrollees for behavioral health also are subject to these physical health disorders. I think this is a nice way to really address the overlap there. And really, I think it's a great equity bill as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from members of the board? Any comments from members of the public? Maria?
I do not see any.
Okay, Maria, will you please call the roll?
Haif Abdullah.
Yes.
Mohammed Abuslam.
Yes.
Kim Barrett.
Yes.
George Blumenthal.
Yes.
Michael Botchin.
Yes.
Linda Boxer.
Yes.
Leandra Clark Harvey.
Yes.
Anne Marie Dulege.
Yes.
Isabel Dudon.
Yes.
Mark Fisher Colbury.
Yes.
Fred Fisher. Fred, I think you just joined again. You might be on mute. I will come back to you. Elena Flowers.
Yes.
Judy Gasson.
Yes.
Larry Goldstein.
Yes.
Thank you. David Higgins.
Yes.
Steve Julesgaard, Rich Lahara.
Yes.
Pat Levitt.
Yes.
David Lowe.
Yes.
Linda Malkus. Okay. Shlomo Melmed.
Yes.
Christine Miskowski.
That was Linda Malcolm.
Yes.
Sorry.
Linda.
Yes.
Hi, Linda. Are you there?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank God the City Hope person.
Lauren Miller Rogan.
Yes.
Adriana Padilla.
Yes.
Al Rolette.
Yes.
Barry Selleck.
Yes.
Marvin Southard.
Yes.
Michael Stamos.
Yes.
Jonathan Thomas.
Yes, and my dog says yes as well.
Art Torres.
Aye.
Christina Vori.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you, both senators very much for this matter, and best of luck to it as it continues along in the legislative process.
Thank you so much.
very much.
Thank you so much for your leadership, Anthony.
If I could have 30 seconds more real quick, is that okay?
Certainly. Yes, sir.
I just want to say I saw UC Davis on the line too, and obviously we're extending the umbilical cord blood collection program in the budget that was in the budget this year. So we're going to continue to collect and store umbilical cord blood, and obviously, you know, there's a big health disparity of who has access, and so that's also important. And then we also have a bill on follow-up mammograms and imaging. You should look at that because, you know, the initial mammogram is covered by insurance, but if your doctor sees an abnormality, that the follow-up imaging is not covered by insurance. And there's a tremendous number of women who can't afford the $800 to get the follow-up imaging, who forego it and then end up with breast cancer and have bad things happen. So we're asking insurance companies to cover the follow-up imaging costs, not just the initial mammogram. So that's a very important, I just wanted to raise those two things too. That's SB 974. So look at that as well, because we shouldn't have women say, I'm not going to get a follow-up image that their doctor wants them to get because they can't afford it.
Good for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the time. And Art, always good to see you.
Thank you, Senator.
You're
Okay,
welcome. Bye-bye.
we're going to go back now to item 7 on the agenda, consideration of amendments to CLIN2 funding opportunity for clinical trial stage projects concept plan. Dr. Creasy will be presenting. Abla.
One second, please. Okay, thank you, Chairman Thomas. So I'm presenting the proposed revision to CLIN2 concept. Therapeutic candidates eligible for clinical trial award currently include the CLIN2 program allows clinical trial studies with a candidate that is either a stem cell therapy or a genetic therapy for phase 1, 2, or 3 trials. Small molecule or biologics involving stem cells are only phase 1 trials. Okay. Therapeutic candidates eligible for clinical trial awards, we propose unifying eligibility to allow all 3 categories to qualify for a phase 1, 2, or 3 clinical trial. That is stem cell therapy, genetic therapy, and small molecule or biologic involving stem cells may apply for phase 1, 2, or 3 trials. That allows for consistent eligibility requirement across all clinical applications and provides the possibility of ongoing CIRM support for small molecule biologic projects that are ready to advance to late-stage clinical trials. Existing eligibility language would be extended to phase 2 and phase 3 clinical trials. The words are a small molecule or biologic that acts on or is dependent on endogenous human stem cells for its therapeutic effect, that is dependent on targeting human cancer stem cells for its therapeutic effect, that modifies a stem cell therapy, or where a human stem cell is necessary to manufacture the therapy, such as extracellular vesicles. Additional minor revisions. A few additional edits have been included in the concept document that represent a clarification in the text. So gene therapy to genetic therapy. There are a few instances where this update was missed in the last round of changes to align with adopted definition of genetic therapy. Clarification that feasibility trials for medical devices are included within the requirements for award amount limits and co-funding amounts. CIRM requests approval of the proposed amendments to the CLIN2 concept plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Abla. Do we have a motion to approve?
I move.
Moved by Anne Marie, second. Second by Haifa. Thank you. Questions or comments from members of the board? Looks like who's first here?
Kim has her hand raised, as does
Kim.
George.
Yes, thank you. Kim and then George.
Yes, Abla, thank you for this proposal, and I agree that it will make things more straightforward and unified, but I would like to have an understanding of why the small molecules and biologics were restricted to only phase 1 in the original concept plan. What was the rationale for that?
We had a couple of reasons. One, at least the thought since the start of CIRM, is that in general, when a successful a small molecule or a biologic finishes a successful phase 1, most of the time industry likes to partner with them, and they have other opportunities for funding. But the second reason is during the end of the tenure of Proposition 71, we had limited resources to even think about that, and we basically focused on cell and gene therapy for mainly, phase 1 and phase 2 and 3 for stem cells, biologics, and genetic therapy. I'm sorry, genetic therapy and cell therapy.
So now it's felt that resources are such that restriction is no longer needed?
Correct from a resource viewpoint, but the environment also changed. There is now a convergence about such molecules, especially remember we're keeping the requirement that the small molecule and the biologic have to be targeting a stem cell or involved with a stem cell mechanism of action. So it's still consistent with our mission. And that allows us to also, there's the convergence of that effort regarding conditioning, and some of those programs likely are moving at a pace where they need assistance, especially with the situation with advancing the whole area of biotechnology is having a downturn. So we thought that this would be the right place for CIRM to de-risk these programs and bring them in and advance them with the same as the cell and genetic therapy.
Thank you. I want to clarify that I'm not in any way opposed to the idea. I was just trying to understand the basis.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. George?
Actually, Kim just asked my question, so I'm lowering my hand.
Okay, thank you. Other questions or comments from members of the board? Any comments from members of the public?
There are no hands raised.
Thank you. Maria, will you please call the roll?
Haifa Abdullah,
Yes.
Mohammed Abusalam,
Yes.
Kim Barrett,
Aye.
George Blumenthal,
Yes.
Michael Botchin,
Yes.
Linda Boxer,
Yes.
Leander Clark Harvey,
Yes.
Anne Marie Dulage,
Yes.
Isabel Dudon,
Yes.
Mark Fisher Colbry,
Yes.
Brad Fisher, Elena Flowers,
Yes.
Judy Gasson,
Yes.
Larry Goldstein,
Yes.
David Higgins,
Yes.
Rich Lahara,
Yes.
Pat Levitt,
Yes.
David Lowe,
Yes.
Linda Malkus,
Yes.
Shlomo Mohamed,
Yes.
Christine Wiskowski,
Yes.
Lauren Miller Rogan,
Yes.
Adriana Padilla,
Yes.
Al Rolette,
Aye.
Barry Selleck,
Yes.
Marvin Southard,
Yes.
Michael Stamos,
Yes.
Jonathan Thomas,
Yes.
Art Torres,
Aye.
Christina Vori.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you, Maria. On to item number 8, and thank you, Abla, for that presentation. Item number 8 is consideration of California's cell and gene therapy manufacturing network concept plan. We will hear from Dr. Patel. Sean?
Thank you, Chairman Thomas. I hope you can hear me okay. I'm going to share my slides. All right. So thank you to the board for giving us the opportunity today to present this manufacturing network concept plan. I also want to thank Apple and Zoom for letting my screen share work today. So we're off to a good start already. So my presentation is going to walk us through this concept plan proposal. There are a large number of slides, so bear with me, as well as there's some animation involved. So hopefully it all works. Okay, so starting with the mission statement. Our mission is to accelerate world-class science to deliver transformative regenerative medicine treatments in an equitable manner to a diverse California and world. So this was approved by the board late last year. In addition to approving the new mission statement, the board also approved the new strategic plan that Maria highlighted earlier this afternoon. And in there were 3 themes, and this particular concept plan directly addresses one objective within the real world solutions theme, which is creating a manufacturing partnership network. It also touches on a couple of objectives of the other 2 themes, so specifically the developing competency hubs of the world-class science theme, as well as to build a diverse workforce in the state of California for the provide opportunity for all theme. And I'll walk through how it does that in the next few slides. So the cell, as you know, cell and gene therapies have been rapidly advancing to the clinic, and many of them have accelerated approval pathways to get to approval. And that creates pressure on the manufacturing development, which often can, in some instances, lag behind the clinical development of these therapies. In fact, there have been various prominent examples of cell and gene therapy approvals that have been stalled due to CMC issues. So I'm going to highlight a couple of infrastructure and resource bottlenecks and briefly mention technical bottlenecks that we think we can address in California with this particular proposal. So first of all, as many of you know, academic institutions are the center of technology innovation and the initial process development in GMP manufacturing for cell and gene therapies, but they don't have sufficient capacity, resources, or processes for late-stage manufacturing. And this is often by design. They focus on the early process development as well as the early phase 1 clinical trial manufacturing. On the flip side, there's the industry manufacturing resources. For example, there's contract development and manufacturing organizations that support cell and gene therapy manufacturing, or in-house operations of the companies of all sizes, from small biotechs to large biopharma. These are best positioned to industrialize manufacturing processes for late-stage clinical trials and commercialization, but they don't always have the expertise in emerging technology platforms that are arising from academia. So for example, the CRISPRs, Lenti, AAV gene therapies, the types of new technologies that are emerging that academia has innovated on. In addition to these 2 infrastructure bottlenecks, we're all aware of the complexities of the products and the processes involved for cell and gene therapies, and these create various technical bottlenecks that are being addressed in all sorts of different ways by both individual projects and programs, as well as on a national level. And lastly, there's an ever-growing demand for a trained manufacturing and quality workforce, particularly in the state of California, as more and more companies are launching in cell and gene therapies, and there's a massive demand for more workers in this industry across the entire spectrum. So in order to address this, first we're going to walk through the California landscape for manufacturing for cell and gene therapies. So on the academic side, There are academic cell and gene therapy manufacturing facilities associated with many of the research organizations that have received funds, CIRM funding in the past. And a majority of our funded programs from translational to Clin2 are utilizing these facilities. So these include well-established facilities that have been around for a long time, such as UC Davis and City of Hope, as well as new ones that are emerging at places such as Cedars-Sinai, USC, and UC Irvine. On the industry side, there are cell and gene therapy manufacturing contract organizations that do fee-for-service or partnership models, as well as some biopharma companies in California that also have partnership models to support projects that they're partnering on. So on the CDMO side, these tend to range from small operations all the way to large operations of multinational companies on the CDMO side. And on the biopharma side, both Bayer and Novo Nordisk, two of our industry alliance partners, have facilities in the state of California that they're looking to support for their partnered projects. So the intent with this manufacturing concept plan is to create a unique model where there's partnership and collaboration between the academic facilities as well as the industry facilities to address certain goals that we think are important to advance cell and gene therapies for Californians and the world. So as we had described in the strategic plan, our vision is to build a network where CIRM funding to academic GMP facilities is coordinated in addition to industry partners by CIRM to address the three main goals that are listed on the right side of this slide. So the first and foremost is to accelerate and de-risk the pathway to commercialization for cell and gene therapies, particularly the ones supported by CIRM. Second is to advance industry standards and quality by design for a growing and evolving industry such as cell and gene therapies to get to the industrialization that we see on the biologics and small molecule side. And lastly, as we've been noting, is to build the manufacturing leadership and workforce in California, creating opportunities for underserved populations in particular in that respect. So with that in mind, there are a few functions that we think this network can address, and I'll walk through some of those here. These are not meant to be limiting, but meant to be illustrative of what the concept plan can achieve. So first and foremost, there are a wide range of manufacturing and analytical technology platforms at play for cell and gene therapies. And we think any network, especially one for a state such as California, should represent that world-class expertise across that whole range. Secondly, is to support the manufacturing of therapies for rare, ultra-rare diseases. There's an opportunity here to take platform-based approaches to not only develop, but manufacture a large number of candidates to meet the various rare diseases that Abla has highlighted that affect a large population on aggregate. So these could be things such as CRISPR or lenti approaches or AAV approaches where a common technology platform can address a large number of diseases. We also want to accelerate and de-risk late-stage and commercial manufacturing of therapies. This is a key component to having approval and commercialization of these types of therapies. And this is going to become a more and more relevant focus area for CIRM as its portfolio evolves and continues to grow, as well as the field as a whole as they mature toward more therapies going to the clinic and into commercialization. As I mentioned previously, as its nascent industry continues to mature, there's a need to establish standards for quality, as well as accreditation of manufacturing facilities, particularly in the academic setting. And lastly, is to build an inclusive workforce that addresses both entry and advancement opportunities in technical and leadership career pathways, in partnership with EDUC programs and industry stakeholders. These could range from community colleges to biotech companies to big pharma that is present in California. In fact, we've been talking about EDUC at the conference the last few days. Many of us met several students who were not aware of manufacturing career pathways until they'd done their internship at companies or GMP facilities. And out of that, they grew to really appreciate and admire the workforce and the opportunities present in process development and manufacturing, and many have gone to have careers in that space with companies in California. So there is a growing awareness in the student population for opportunities for career pathways in manufacturing. So with that, the next few slides are really going to focus on the funding opportunity itself with the two phases that we're building out here that we're proposing to you, as well as activities can be incorporated into those two phases. So this particular concept plan describes a biphasic funding opportunity composed of two phases. The first phase is more of a preparative phase, and the second phase is more of a scale-up phase. So before I jump into the details of those, I want to ensure and note that the funding that is going to be provided for this opportunity is going to be similar to Alpha Clinics, where we're funding operational costs and enhancements at the facilities, but the actual cell and gene therapy manufacturing costs would still come from the CIRM pipeline programs like TRAN and CLIN awards. In addition, while these funding opportunities will focus on funding academic GMP facilities, they are expected to have partnerships with other academic facilities, as well as the industry stakeholders in the state of California. And I'll map how that might play out for these two phases. So the first phase is the preparative phase. This is a program budget of $20 million with a max duration of 2 years and a max award amount of $2 million for each award. The applicant is an academic cell and gene therapy manufacturing facility, and they could have optional collaborators if they need for the activities. And the predominant goal here is going to be individual facility enhancements at those academic facilities. And I'll describe what those activities might entail and the outcome metrics that might be linked to that in the next few slides. The second phase would have a program budget of $60 million with a max award amount of $5 million and a max duration of 5 years. Here, the applicant will be the academic cell and gene therapy manufacturing facility, but it would be required to have collaborators as part of this approach because this is all focused on scaling out the enhancements that they had made in that first phase. And the goal here would be to create network-wide scaling of enhancements, specializations, and training programs, all of which I'll describe in the next few slides. So the phase 2 will be informed in large part by what happens in phase 1. And that will be coordinated by a steering committee of awardees and external participants that's going to act as the glue between the individual awardees, as well as the linkage between phase 1 and phase 2 award activities. And I'll describe what we envision the steering committee to do at the end of this presentation. So I'm going to walk through some potential award activities that across 3 major categories in this slide. And the next slide, I'll present how those activities might be phased for phase 1 and phase 2. These activities are not meant to be limiting. They're meant to be illustrative to provide an overall, what we believe is the intent of this manufacturing network concept plan. So first of all, it's de-risking accelerating manufacturing, as we mentioned. So here, we would anticipate that the academic GMP facility applicants would be focusing on making quality-driven improvements to their operations that de-risk early process development, the GMP manufacturing occurring at their facilities, as well as the tech transfer, both for bringing projects into their facilities, as well as for projects transitioning out to industry partners for late-stage manufacturing and commercial manufacturing. It would also involve actively mitigating capacity and expertise gaps by coordinating project execution across the network. Then we anticipate this funding being used for specialized offerings. So these could be facilities and their partners specializing in particular technology platforms, for example, CRISPR, AAV gene therapy, lentiviral cell gene therapy, or analytical methods, or being pioneers in quality by design implementation. Automation, which is an important aspect of scaling up, scaling out, as well as lowering manufacturing costs, or the ultra rare disease manufacturing platforms that I mentioned previously. And lastly, on workforce development, we anticipate this funding opportunity being used to develop and implement training programs for both technical positions as well as mentorship programs to leadership positions, all in partnership with the EDUC programs that I previously mentioned, as well as industry stakeholders. So to recap, the phase 1 would be initial progress at individual facilities, and phase 2 would be network-wide implementation of these enhancements, specializations, and workforce development programs across the network in California. So we've been talking a lot about how at a big level on this. So I'm going to walk you through an illustrative example to demonstrate how phase 1 and phase 2 activities might interplay with each other. And I'll use that first example of quality-driven operational enhancements to illustrate that. So individual awardees in the phase 1 award for de-risking manufacturing may focus on quality system improvements. They may focus on implementation of quality by design principles, or they may be focused on hiring and training staff to better meet the needs of the projects they support, both from process development to initial GMP manufacturing. And the outcomes of such activities for a phase 1 award may be driven by how these improvements have improved execution of projects compared to the historical performance of their facilities. On the phase 2 side now, with respect to all the improvements and enhancements that were made at the individual facilities and having a metric on how those performed in the individual facilities, phase 2 could focus on taking the best practices, the quality improvements, and implementing those across the network. Similarly, they could operationalize partnerships to effectively transition projects for late stage and commercial manufacturing. This is where the academic GMP facilities will create a pathway for projects that they support from early process development through early GMP manufacturing. And then there's a partner or a set of partners or a set of processes that could allow and facilitate rapid progression of those projects to late stage manufacturing in the industrial setting for therapies as they go into pivotal clinical trials and then into commercialization. And in those instances, the outcome metrics could be success rate of partnership-driven progression of projects to late-stage and commercial manufacturing, as well as how well does a network implement the agreed upon quality standards and protocols and best practices across all the sites. So to highlight a couple of other potential outcome metrics for the other areas that I had mentioned. So far I've been talking about de-risking manufacturing, but on the specializations and workforce development side, you could have phase 1 outcome metrics that talk about how competency in specialization areas was demonstrated by executing pilot projects. For example, if they're specializing in CRISPR technology platform, maybe they demonstrate how they're able to more effectively drive CRISPR projects through their facilities. And then to enroll their first trainee cohorts for technical and leadership training programs on their workforce development side. On the phase 2 side, it would be rolling this out in our network capacity. So for example, on the specializations, how well are the specializations utilized across California by the collaborating facilities and projects? And then on the workforce development side, to show sustained enrollment in training programs and the success rate of the trainee job placement, both for technical positions and leadership positions. As with all of our recent concept plans, there is a DEI component and a knowledge sharing component. So for this particular concept plan, the DEI component, there's 2 major categories. So first and foremost is participation in workforce development programs by underserved populations. And then secondly, on the project team side, is that does the project team represent diverse and inclusive perspectives and experiences? Because manufacturing has a direct line to patients and patient therapies. And so here we expect that the team itself could be diverse and inclusive of those perspectives and experiences. And on the knowledge sharing side, they would be required to propose knowledge sharing plans, and first and foremost to describe a plan to capture and disseminate relevant know-how, operational data, processes, expertise, and guidance within the network. And then if there are core components in their activities that require sharing, they would have to describe how the knowledge sharing plans are critical to achieving those award objectives. And lastly, as you know quite well, all of our Tran and CLIN applicants are required to have their own data sharing and management plans. So how will these facilities have data management processes and practices that will support the Tran and CLIN awardees' ability to have their own respective data management and sharing plans executed? And so lastly, I'm going to end with talking a little bit about the steering committee itself. So as I mentioned, the steering committee is the glue between the awardees and the glue between the 2 phases. So the steering committee will be composed of the awardees themselves, our California industry partners, as well as national stakeholders. So think of NIMBLE, Army, and so on, that are all have similar efforts on a national scale around manufacturing for cell and gene therapies. This steering committee would be focused on facilitating the identification and adoption of standards, protocols, and best practices across the network, and to potentially create criteria for facility accreditation, which may be important going forward for this field. To mitigate capacity and expertise gaps across participating sites. So this is to, for example, if there's a long lead time at one facility, could some of the partners take up those projects? Or could there be a way to share knowledge and expertise across the sites to facilitate execution of a project at a particular site? collaborative planning for phase 2 proposals. So as I mentioned, the phase 2 proposals will be informed largely about what happens in phase 1, and this coordinating committee has an important facilitating role for that. To develop systems and processes for sharing information and resources between network participants. So this is critical in terms of how best practices, protocols, documents, templates, and so on are shared between all the participants in the network. And lastly, to coordinate collaborative development and implementation of workforce training programs. So taking what are best practices and coursework or training modules developed across certain sites to make those available across the network so that people are not reinventing the wheel around development of training programs. It could also be critical for job placement as well. So coming back around to the initial example of de-risking manufacturing, I just want to highlight how the steering committee would be playing a role in that set of activities. So with de-risking manufacturing for phase 1 activities, the steering committee could be identifying quality standards for academic GMP facilities, and they could also be defining a knowledge sharing processes that would all feed into the phase 2 steering committee role of applying the quality standards across the network to facilitate knowledge sharing within the network and to triage projects by expertise and capacity across that network. So to summarize the concept plan itself, this has a total program budget of $80 million. Phase 1 is $20 million and phase 2 is $60 million. The awards themselves will have award caps respective for each of those 2 phases, $2 million for phase 1, $5 million for phase 2. The allowable costs include direct project costs and direct facilities costs, and there will be a co-funding component to both of these phase awards at 20%. And as a reminder, the applicants for both the phase 1 and phase 2 awards are proposed to be California nonprofit academic GMP manufacturing facilities with track record of cell and gene therapy project support. So with that, I ask the board to approve this concept plan, and I'm happy to take any questions. Actually, I'll leave it at this slide for now.
Thank you, Sham. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Anne Marie, second. All second.
Second, Mark Colby.
Okay, thank you. All right, questions and comments from members of the board. I can't tell what the order is here, so I'm just going to start with Barry, then to Mohammed, then to Anne Marie.
Okay, thanks, JT. And Sham, thank you very much for the presentation. One thing that wasn't obvious to me, you talk about workforce development and putting in place training programs, but in that $80 million budget, it didn't seem that there was funds earmarked for that specifically. Can you share some of your thinking with respect to how you're thinking about that? What are the nature of the training programs that you are envisioning? And will there be a separate budget set aside for those to, for example, support a program at San Francisco State University, who has a kind of rich history of training scientists for the biotech industry dating back, almost 50 years.
So thank you, Barry, for that question. So, one of the things you pointed out was that the different facilities have different ranges of training programs and different partners that they may already be working with, community colleges, the state universities, as well as industry partners. So while we expect that every applicant is going to be responsive in some way to all 3 of those categories, the level of funding they might need for certain areas is going to vary between the applicants. So rather than setting specific buckets for each of those 3 categories, we're leaving some flexibility for them to identify where they feel the most need there is in those areas for their own activities and budgets. But we would expect that all applicants are addressing specifically on all 3 of those categories. So that's de-risking manufacturing, standard specialization, as well as workforce development.
Okay, thanks, Sean.
Thank you. Mohammed is next, Anne Marie, and then Haifa.
Sham, first I'd like to thank you for the clear presentation, and I really support this initiative because it does take the CIRM activity and push forward our initiative down the supply chain, if you will, and allows us to bring those solutions to market I've got two questions. I don't know if you've considered the intellectual property provisions that you would attach to this activity, because my recommendation is to look at that very closely, because now we're going to be funding assets, perhaps physical assets at these universities that may or may not be used for the production of CIRM funded solutions. So there is an opportunity for some joint value that would be accrued from these assets to bring back funding to CIRM that is not necessarily the same way the IP policy for CIRM programs are running today. So that's one I'd like to hear from you on that. But the second comment or question is, again, since there's going to be a physical asset in some cases, I don't know if you've considered this, but if not, you should, attaching naming rights to the facility or sponsorship rights that go beyond the standard CIRM acknowledgement. Because part of what we need to do as CIRM is to push the message out, not just for the individual solutions that go out, but for CIRM itself and CIRM's initiative to help with increasing the engagement of California citizens with CIRM, with the programs, with the therapies, with the testing. So putting the name out in these academic institutions, big sign that says, funded by CIRM or a CIRM facility, may be very helpful. So I want to hear what your thoughts are on both of these. Thank you.
Thank you. So those are both excellent points and questions. On the first one regarding IP, so what we anticipate here is that our current IP and revenue sharing policies would apply. And I'll describe that to the best of my ability, and maybe Kevin Marks or Ben Wong may have to step in a little bit. So the way that our current IP and revenue sharing provisions work is that across all of our funding mechanisms, if any IP was generated, and if it's monetized in some way down the road, that revenue needs to be shared with the state of California. So here in this instance, if any IP is generated, that's true. Also, in terms of technology and data that is generated and that is used for regulatory filings that support approval of therapies, that also comes into play for revenue sharing. So you're right that here we could have a kind of a broader base for revenue sharing based on how the academic facilities implement any specializations or any IP that's generated from this particular funding mechanism. And I think Maria Milan has a point she wants to raise here.
Just for clarification, Sham, the projects, for instance, the clinical awards have those provisions attached to them on a per project basis. I just don't want to give the impression that anybody who ends up going through this facility then has these IP and revenue sharing tagged onto them. That would, I think, be, something that we would not be able to do. I'm sure that's not, I just wanted to make it, just kind of highlight what Sham said with that clarification.
And Maria, this is exactly my point of recommendation to look into that. Again, if you're funding a facility that will be used, let's say 50% of the time for non-CIRM funded programs, you have still enabled that facility to do that work. And you may want to consider IP revenue through that enabling mechanism. Just a recommendation.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to clarify, make another clarification. These funds will not be used for any building of facilities. It will be for operational costs. So I guess one way to look at it is, kind of the business practices and rules that one would follow is, and models one would follow is if this network that we funded, if you viewed it as one large CDMO, contract manufacturing resource, for instance, what rules would guide that if private entities or other entities, organizations use that facility. So that I think is what we need to take as a kind of a baseline and how that can be structured with relation to IP. But again, as Sham said, we have our legal team, available. But thank you for your suggestions. I think there's some other aspects of that we should explore.
Yeah, and the IP I was referring to is specific to an IP generated by the academic facilities themselves, the awardees, as part of doing the work in this award. So it does not fall under, it would not ensnare the IP of any projects that they are supporting through that. And as Maria mentioned, the Tran and Clin programs have their own revenue sharing provisions applied to those. But there could be some broader IP that may be generated here that could potentially create revenue sharing for CIRM down the road. And then on the second point that you had raised around the naming rights, I think Maria addresses to a certain extent that we're not actually funding the facilities build out themselves, but there have been several recommendations from some of the academic facilities that we spoke to during our outreach about creating kind of an accreditation, that's CIRM accreditation, that I think would be an interesting concept that the steering committee could propose to look at. Would be that now that we have established, particular quality standards as well as some processes and best practices across the state of California for these facilities, is there some sort of a CIRM accredited status that they have now that could potentially help them as well in terms of bringing in projects, because now there is a set of standards that the sponsors themselves can rely on as using these facilities.
Thank you. Anne-Marie, you're next.
Thank you. Very briefly, Sean, excellent presentation, and to all, just an excellent initiative. We know that the field of CMC for regenerative medicine is so complex that I am convinced that this will have a very positive impact overall in bringing products closer and faster to patients. Sean, my overall question is, can you tell me how much is the total cost of this project, the tag on this project, compared to the entire $5.5 billion budget? Just a rough estimate. Is it 7-10%? Roughly.
So it would be, is it 80 million? So it'd be 80 million divided by 5.5 billion.
Yeah.
I am not that good at math, as my colleagues will know. Recently, I claimed I had my 25th running anniversary, where in fact it was the 15th. So I'm going to use the calculator here to get this number right. I don't know if somebody else has it on hand.
Okay, while we're figuring that out, Haifa.
It's not a lot, is the answer.
It's about 2%.
Yeah, that's right.
It's about 2%.
About 1.45%.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about
very well worth it. Very well worth it.
Okay.
So I just have a brief comment. I do feel very strongly about this. I think this is going to be a great program. And as a clinician, I can speak to the clinical and practical aspects. For example, for our patients with multiple myeloma, there are 2 great therapies that are approved, CAR T therapies. And unfortunately, less than of 20% of the patients who are candidate for this treatment can receive it for various reasons. But one important reason is just not being able to manufacture this and being able to provide it to patients. So I'm so excited to hear about this program, and thank you.
Thank you, Haifa. Other comments from members of the board? Pat.
Yeah, I was just wondering about the additional CIRM gold seal of approval, how that differs from the facilities meeting FDA requirements and other requirements that are already standards in the field. Is this upping it? Is it duplicating it? Or yeah, that's my question.
Yeah, it's a great question. So it would not be in lieu of any sort of GMP certifications that the facilities would need to have. So there are a specific set of GMP requirements that they're meeting for being able to support phase 1 clinical trials. Here it would be basically that there's a certain level of quality potentially that's being implemented with respect to their quality systems, going above and beyond what their GMP requirements might be, as well as, creating these templates that for tech transfer for projects coming in and out, and those types of things.
Okay, so it's not duplicative, right? It's in addition to. I just want to make sure that it's not, adding more work that's not necessarily required for. I think this is a really critical initiative, obviously. As long as it's not adding, what I would sometimes define as busy work, because they're already meeting very high standards. If this is meeting higher standards, that would speed up the process for quality manufacturing in California, then I think that's great.
Okay, Isabel.
Thank you, JT. To the point, thanks very much for the presentation. It was quite excellent. I'm very excited about the aspect of workforce development and appreciate there were mentions also of internships. Glad to see that, in fact, we do already have some university relationships and opportunities. I too had some of those conversations at the Bridges meeting where I heard students thinking outside the box of, not in the lab per se, but in the industry part. So I'm glad that we can offer through those internships and workforce development jobs a chance for them to see the science through a different lens. And I think that's also very much important to promote in terms of the development of a diverse California workforce in the sciences. And so I hope that we in the communications subcommittee can find ways in which we can also help you once all of this is worked out to see how we can also shine a light on that. It's not just in the lab, but it's also out there in the fields and, that are opportunities for our future leaders. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that will be critical.
Thank you, Isabel. Larry?
Great job, Sham. I think it's a terrific program, and I think my prediction is that it's going to need to expand as time goes on, because manufacturing is going to be a continued bottleneck in the development of cells and genes and everything else. My question is, have you thought about adding an annual meeting to the program plan? Because seems that bringing these guys together every year to talk about their enhancements and breakthroughs, this will be a rapidly moving area.
Yes, we did. So we thought about the annual meeting, and then we kind of moved toward the steering committee, which is going to probably meet more frequently than annually. And so that would actually bring that together. But I think, a point that you raised could be really interesting is to have an annual meeting that, like the Alpha Stem Cell Clinic side, where you have external stakeholders also attending that meeting and turning it into a conference of presentations and so on. And that is something that we had considered in the past and maybe worth considering here.
Well, and the thing about an annual meeting is that the folks who are not the leadership can attend those and learn from each other.
It's a great point. We can build that into the, I think the way that we've been doing it in the past is that the annual meetings come out of the conference budget. And so we would be able to incorporate that into that.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other board member hands raised. As we noted in the science subcommittee, this concept plan, which obviously reflects a huge amount of work, has been a long time in coming. There was a great deal of work put into convening the manufacturing symposium that took place in 2021, and all of this flows from that. So this is a highly considered program that I think all of us believe will have a dramatic impact. So Sham, congratulations to you and the team for putting this all together. Do we have any comments from members of the public on this motion?
I do not see any.
Okay, Maria, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Haifa Dulhak.
Yes.
Mohammed Abuslam.
Yes.
Kim Barrett.
Aye.
George Blumenthal.
Yes.
Michael Botchin.
Aye.
Linda Boxer.
Yes.
Leander Clark Harvey.
Yes.
Anne Marie Dulege.
Yes.
Isabel Duran.
Yes.
Mark Fisher Colbury.
Aye.
Fred Fisher.
Yes.
Elena Flowers.
Yes.
Judy Gowson.
Yes.
Larry Goldstein.
Yes.
David Higgins.
Yes.
Rich Lahara.
Yes.
Pat Levitt.
Yes.
David Lowe.
Yes.
Linda Malkus.
Yes.
Shlomo Mahmoud.
Yes.
Christine Miskowski.
Yes.
Lauren Miller Rogan.
Yes.
Adriana Padilla,
Yes.
Al Rolette,
Yes.
Barry Selleck,
Yes.
Marvin Southard,
Yes.
Michael Stamos,
Yes.
Jonathan Thomas,
Yes.
Art Torres.
Aye, and thank you, Sean.
The motion carries.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, everybody. Item 9, consideration of revision to CIRM compensation levels. Kevin Marks. Kevin?
Thank you, Chairman Thomas. I'm going to ask Marianne's going to advance the slides for me. So as a part of this presentation, there's 3 documents we're going to ask the board to consider. One is the presentation that I will walk you through, which outlines the scope of this HR-related project. The second document will be a revision to the compensation, the CIRM compensation levels that come as a result of this. And the third is a backup document, which shows the revised salary ranges that we've been considering in formulation of the compensation levels. Next slide, please. Actually, 2 slides. So we've done the mission, so we can skip right to the overall scope of the project. So around May or early June of last year, the board requested that the staff take a look at the salary ranges and relevant market data across the organization. The last time that was done by an external agency was in 2007. So it appeared time to ensure that the compensation ranges for each of the positions, as well as the compensation levels across the organization, continue to be appropriate. While we were doing this, and unfortunately, we've had an extensive delay in gathering this information, but what this allowed us to do is actually take a broader look at our current HR strategies and a lot of the foundational pieces of the HR function and our program, and see if we needed to make any improvements to align with the direction we were taking as an agency in accordance with the new strategic plan. Next slide, please. So the whole scope of the compensation project started with just looking at a detailed summary of the relative worth of the jobs, looking at our competitive and internal alignment. We wanted to make sure that we still had the ability to attract good talent and retain good talent. And so as a part of that was really identifying and collecting our competitive data sources. What we were able to do, again, as a result of a little bit of the delay, is we could look at a compensation structure more broadly, because we could take a deeper dive into our HR strategy and ensure that our compensation philosophy, mission, culture, and business model, there's connectivity across the organization. The other thing we wanted to do too is come up with a more of a formulaic documented process that takes a look at how we do our job analysis, look at our internal and external evaluations of opportunities, and making sure that when we have positions, our current positions and any new positions, that we have the ability to assign them to a grade and pay level and role within our overall job structure. Next slide. So the HR part of this project was really kind of taking a deeper dive, and one, just ensuring that all of our positions have duty statements under job descriptions. We wanted to look at leveling across the organization because there appeared to be, some levels of inconsistency. So, for example, our vice president levels in the organization were at 2 different levels. We had associate directors and directors that were scattered in various levels across the organization. And what we wanted to do in this project too is determine if there's any changes that were necessary. We wanted to be transparent as to what our performance expectations were for our employees. We wanted to take a look at career ladders and be able to clearly identify that. We wanted to look at opportunities, and we really wanted to develop consistencies across the expectations for how we describe our positions. Next slide, please. So as part of our summary here, and I have to compliment our HR staff as well as our leaders across the organization, because a tremendous amount of effort went into reviewing all of our levels of position across the organization. And that with respect to what are the expectations of the roles, what are the competencies that we want to develop and have represented and demonstrated in these positions. And then how do we benchmark the compensation and make any corrective reassignments that are necessary. We really are committing ourselves to ensure that every position within the organization has a clear job description or duty statement. We developed brand new competencies for and detailed competencies for everything from the associate director above, because that's where we really have consistency across the organization and how we title our positions. So it was important to understand what constitutes an associate director, what constitutes a director, VP, et cetera. We've then taken those descriptions and competencies that we've been developing and put this into a revised performance evaluation process. So really it becomes a standard by which employees are now measured specifically against those expectations. Some of the other areas that we developed or had consistencies and created is we realigned the VP level so that all VPs were captured in the level 9. Now, what you will see, and I'll explain a little further in a bit, is what we're recommending in our compensation levels right now across the organizations are only levels 1 through 8. We're still reserving 9 and 10 for some further evaluation. We created a broader senior director level. When we started this project, we had only one senior director position. But in looking across the organization and looking at advancement opportunities, we realized that a senior director level was necessary to create a stepwise approach between the director and the VP levels. And finally, in working very closely with our leaders and what I call our core programs, but we're basically looking at review therapeutics and scientific programs, we created a fellowship track. And what this allows for is more career advancements across our core programs to enable us to have a managerial track as well as an individual contributor track. Next slide, please. So really, as a part of our then taking this into our compensation review, we retain Morgan HR. As many of you noted, we started this project with Mercer last year. Mercer was unable to complete the customized review of our compensation. So we then pivoted to Morgan HR, who has incredible expertise in working with, I would call, unique organizations that are really individualized in their approach. Part of the companies that they've worked with are the Academy Awards, for example, the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So they have, again, an expertise in looking at the uniqueness and then putting it into more of the standardization when we're looking at various compensation and benchmarking levels. And we brought them in really because we needed to ensure this external competitiveness as well as the internal quality across our group. Did an extensive amount of review in all of our positions across our unique jobs, and each job was internally aligned to first Radford's global grade hierarchy, because it's important to, in order to establish our benchmark positions across the ERI compensation data, we need to ensure that we're coding and looking at, to the greatest extent we can, like for like opportunities. As many of you are also aware that CIRM has a unique obligation, according to statute, to benchmark our compensation against the UC Regents educational system, specifically the medical schools, as well as private research institutions within California. So to accomplish this, Morgan reached out or collected compensation information from those various entities. We then determined that in conclusion, really, that a majority of our salaries were aligned within the salary range data based on what we were finding. And the ranges that we were pinning were the market data for the 25th to the 75th percentile. And why we picked those, because they were consistent with the percentiles that the board had previously approved during other compensation reviews. Next slide, please. So as part of the methodology, again, Morgan worked with us in creating and developing and gathering all of our existing job descriptions and taking a look at that analysis. They used the ERI data to take a look at from a coding perspective and then how we compare to other organizations. And then we were able to do, or Morgan was able to create a modification depending on the geographic location and use Oakland, because that was our headquarters at the time we started this review, to take a look at geographically, how do we benchmark the data? As you know, specifically for the UCs, there's a lot of flexibility depending on geographic location. So it was very important for us as an organization, as most of our employees are based in the Bay Area, to make sure our compensation reflected Bay Area rates. So as you can see in the next part of the slide on what they were able to do, so they customized the survey, they looked at publicly available information, and then compared that to the ERI data that they were seeing. Next slide, please. So they came forward with a pay structure that recommended our current philosophy, and really, again, as I stated before, that looked to really reflect what CIRM's compensation philosophy was and has been determined before. We took a look at the 25th to the 75th percentiles to calculate the min and maxes for each of the levels. Now, one of how we create the CIRM levels as approach to the individual market data is we take all of those positions that are found within a particular comp level. We take the min of the min and the max of the max, and then that's the broad range that you'll see in the CIRM compensation levels. So we took this information, we brought it back into the organization. We've been working with another external advisor, Tammy Buechner, who's our external HR consultant, myself and Maria, and we looked across the organization, and we ultimately we reviewed it, we approved it. This information was taken to the governance subcommittee in early July. And was approved and recommended. The compensation levels were approved or recommended for approval. I'm sorry, at the governance subcommittee. So is there a next slide, or is this the last? Yeah. So next steps and recommendations. So so we've implemented the title changes and respective grades. We want to continue to develop core job descriptions for each of the positions. Making sure every time that we go and either create new jobs or look to modify and add duties to existing jobs, that we have existing documentation for those. We're going to continue to review all of our job grades and market values at least annually to make sure that we're fitting within the desired pay levels. Again, we're going to continue to look at the market, and we're going to utilize this information from a pay equity perspective internally. So we want to ensure that our compensation strategies are relevant, that if we do have any pay gaps, that we reduce them effectively, and that we have no disparate impacts on employees as a result of any pay inequities. So just as a final point, I know some questions have been raised in the past about what's the impact of employees to this. So there's really no detrimental impact to employees. No employees' salaries have gone down as a result of this. We're in the midst of our compensation, our performance evaluation and compensation review at this current time. So there's no impact, a downward impact to employees. Most or a majority of our employees fall within the respective salary ranges. So that's a good step that CIRM has been moving in lockstep with how the market has been performing with regard to pay. So at the end, what I'll be asking for is a motion to accept the compensation levels that we'll be recommending. And now I'll ask Mary Ann if she can display those. Not that one, it's the other one. Sorry, 1 second here. In the meantime, while she's pulling that up, are there any questions on the presentation? I don't see any. Maria, do you see any?
No.
Okay, thank you. So as you can see here, there's sort of a head-to-head comparison. On the left-hand side, what you see is our existing pay ranges for the various levels. And on the right-hand side, what you see is the modified version that we're asking for recommendation. Now, as I commented before, levels 9 and 10, we're not at this point proposing any additional changes. That's because we continue to pressure test the data that we've received as a result of these positions. These are unique positions to CIRM, and we want to make sure that we're benchmarking them accordingly. In addition, at the time we were looking through this, the board was also considering the scope of the duties for the chair and vice chair positions. and we were uncertain as to where that they would slot into the levels. Now that we know based upon the duties that they will go into the level 10 and 9 positions, we're taking that, we're trying to benchmark data on those positions and then incorporate those into the ranges. So in consultation with the governance subcommittee, we make the recommendation that we will continue to look at this. We expect to be done in the next couple of weeks and present it to the next governance subcommittee meeting in early September and subsequently to the board at the end of September. So as you also see through the comparison that the ranges were not far off. So the modified ranges to a great extent are very consistent with the prior ranges. What we also wanted to do too is, if you notice, basically in most ranges from 7 on down, is that you have multiple numbers in each of the ranges. So what we've done is we've created greater breadth within the levels, but we have just consistent levels for each of the ranges with one range number instead of multiple range numbers. So I believe that's it. So again, I will take any questions, and if there's no, I see Senator Torres, yes.
Yes, I just want to thank you, because I know what you and Maria and the others have done. It was an arduous task. We just went through that, as you know, because I've been in communication with you at the UC, especially in terms of measuring chancellor salaries, as well as other academics. It is not an easy process. And to get the right mix of consultants to help you look at all of the parameters is also a challenge. So kudos to you, Kevin, and kudos to the folks that Maria B, Maria M, and others who participated in the process. I'm grateful that I didn't have to do it twice.
Thank you, Senator Torres, much appreciated.
Okay, so Kevin, can you just, let's see, any other, can you just again frame the ask on the motion, please?
Sure, certainly. So the ask of the staff recommendation is for a motion to approve the proposed compensation levels, the CIRM compensation levels, which were the last document that you saw.
So moved.
Moved by Senator Torres. Is there a second?
Second. I second.
I think Kim beat you to it there, George. Thank you. Any other questions or comments by members of the board?
Can I just ask, Kevin, are the actuals between those two, the minimum and the max at this stage, the actual amount that these various group people are getting? They're
Yes.
not getting minimum, are they? So they might be getting max, which is cool for them. But are we looking at any actuals? It'd be nice to see actuals, actually. I don't know if that's allowed.
So as state employees, all of our employees' salaries are public information. We have not presented that. We have not presented that in the past. We are perfectly able to present that to the board if the board wishes to see the compensation levels of our employees. We have been moving. So what I said before is there's been no detrimental impact on employees as a result of these new ranges. What we did identify is that we had certain employees that were paid below the ranges, and we're making those corrective actions to ensure that we're paying competitively. So, so rest assured that we are slotting everyone within the respective salary ranges for their positions.
I just think that we do have the opportunities to work with some people, but not always with all. And we oftentimes value them very highly, and we want to make sure that they are getting what they're worth. And so it was curiosity on my part. Thank you. It was good clarification.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Isabel. Larry, then Fred.
Yeah, I want to echo Art and Isabel, Kevin. It is critical that we make sure that CIRM staff are paid fairly, particularly with respect to the cost of living in the Bay Area. Our ability to function at top quality is completely dependent on the quality of our staff. And so we want to make sure that we pay them fairly and retain them when they're at the quality level we expect and hope for, which generally they are. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Fred?
So in addition to applauding the effort, I'm wondering if the changes in compensation that you're anticipating that are appropriate, whether that requires a change in the budget in terms of the annual operating budget that perhaps this board passes. Does it require an amendment to the budget to deal with those changes?
No. So what we did is we had some preliminary data as we were preparing the budget and made certain assumptions. So those assumptions tend to be valid, and the number that was put forth for the personnel increase in the current budget will not change.
Thank you. Barry?
Thanks, JT. Kevin, just to follow on from the point that Isabel was making, am I correct in assuming that there must be a compensation subcommittee of the board that does actually review the salaries of the individual members of the team?
So there is currently not a compensation subcommittee. I believe, and Maria Bonneville, please correct me, that there used to be a compensation subcommittee. That task has been absorbed up into the governance subcommittee.
Just a correction, there was no board subcommittee. There was a compensation committee. There was an internal informal meeting of the chair and the president, and they would review salaries together. But it was not a subcommittee of the board, just as a clarification.
Thank you.
Okay, well, just as a suggestion, a nice compromise might be to form a small subcommittee of the board, simply because the ranges, Kevin, that you presented are quite broad, okay? And it may help to have kind of a pseudo-independent look at the actual salaries within the ranges, just to make sure that there's not some sort of unconscious bias that, you know, some people tend to be located towards the lower end of the range and others tend to be in the upper end of the range. And an independent subcommittee of the board could be useful in helping sort that out.
Okay, thank you for that suggestion, Barry. We will discuss that. Any other questions by members of the board? Any comments from members of the public?
I do not see any.
Hearing none, Maria, will you please call the roll?
Haif Abdullah,
Yes.
Mohammed Abuslam,
Yes.
Kim Barrett,
Aye.
George Blumenthal,
Yes.
Michael Botchin, Linda Boxer,
Yes.
Leander Clark Harvey,
Yes.
Anne Marie Dulage,
Yes.
Isabel Dudon,
Yes.
Mark Fisher Colbury,
Yes.
Fred Fisher,
Yes.
Elena Flowers,
Yes.
Judy Gasson,
Yes.
Larry Goldstein,
Yes.
David Higgins,
Yes.
Rich Lahara,
Yes.
Yes.
Pat Levitt,
Yes.
David Lowe,
Yes.
Linda Malkus,
Yes.
Shlomo Malmed, Christine Miskowski, Lauren Miller Rogan,
Yes.
Adriana Padilla,
Yes.
Al Rolette,
Yes.
Barry Selleck,
Yes.
Marvin Southard,
Yes.
Michael Stamos, Jonathan Thomas,
Yes.
Art Torres,
Aye.
Christina Vori.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Thank you, Kevin and team, for all your hard work. We look forward to completing the topic when we get the data for the levels 9 and 10, as you say, in the next few weeks. I'm going to circle back. We had one consent item, which was the approval of the minutes for the June 23rd ARS and the June 27th ICOC. Does anybody want to take that item out of the consent agenda? Hearing none, do we have a motion to approve?
I make the motion.
Thank you, Mohammed. Is there a second?
Second.
Who is that? Sorry.
Dave, this is David and Sandy.
David, thank you, David. Okay, any questions or comments by members of the board? Any public comment?
No.
Maria, will you please call the roll?
Sure. Hype Abdullah,
Yes.
Mohammed Abuslam,
Yes.
Kim Barrett,
Aye.
George Blumenthal,
Yes.
Linda Boxer,
Yes.
Leona Clark Harvey,
Yes.
Anne Marie Dulege,
Yes.
Isabel Dudon,
Yes.
Mark Fisher Colbury,
Yes.
Fred Fisher,
Yes.
Elena Flowers,
Yes.
Judy Gaston,
Yes.
Larry Goldstein,
Yes.
David Higgins,
Yes.
Rich Lahara,
Yes.
Pat Levitt,
Yes.
David Lowe,
Yes.
Linda Malkus,
Yes.
Shlomo Melmed, Christine Miskowski, Lauren Miller Rogan,
Yes.
Adriana Padilla,
Yes.
Al Roulette, Al,
UC Desert.
Yes.
thank you, Barry Selick,
Yes, the opportunity.
I'm abstaining. I wasn't at the meeting.
UC.
Marvin Southard,
Yes.
Michael Stamos, Jonathan Thomas,
Yes.
Art Torres,
Aye.
Christina Vori.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Maria. That concludes the action item agenda. We're now into general public comments. Are there any general public comments on any topics of interest?
I have, oh, go ahead, David.
JT, I just wanted, or Maria, I wanted to ask a quick question. How's the new facility coming along? I'm just curious, just a curiosity question. How's the new space?
Oh, that's for me, Maria.
Yeah, I was like, I can't answer that.
I'm going to deflect this to Kevin Marks, who's also in charge of our facilities planning. Kevin?
I do apologize. I was doing some internal communications here and I missed the question. So could you please repeat?
How are things going with the move?
Good question. Thanks for that. They are moving along. We have a an in-depth project team now with respect to TGS, internal staff. Our contractors are on board. I have a meeting actually this afternoon to more clearly understand and get a complete articulation of our timeline. But we continue to move forward. In the interim, what we've done, however, is created more temporary space almost throughout the Bay Area. So we have temporary workspaces reserved in Oakland. I'm currently sitting with Marianne and Ben here in the Gateway Complex in what's called the Lighthouse. And we have space reserved on a weekly basis there for employee groups to get together and meet. What we're trying to do is phase in now our return to office so it's not just an abruptness and get people used to actually coming in and working with each other on a more regular basis. So we'll continue in that structure until our build out is complete. We did have plans for partial occupancy of the floor while construction was still taking place. We're still in conversations with the landlord around that. And we're hoping that still is a feasible option. It's looking a bit more doubtful with that from a risk perspective. But we're doing everything to ensure that we're bringing employees together more frequently, building that collaborative work environment until the office is complete. Probably more than you wanted to know, but here you are.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Hey, Maria, any public comment?
I have two notes to share. So the first one is from Don Reed, ICOC public comment. As an involved member of the public, I naturally support the great work being done by the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine. Accordingly, I'm concerned that the recent return of the personhood movement, which directly threatens embryonic stem cell research. Personhood would define a fertilized egg or blastocyte as a full human being under law. Proponents have often stated their intent to criminalize embryonic stem cell research directly or indirectly. A recent federal bill, the Life at Conception Act, would, quote, extend to embryos a constitutional right to life beginning at the moment of fertilization. This bill has been read twice and referred to the Judiciary Committee. It has 164 co-sponsors in the U.S. House of Representatives. That bill does not mention stem cell research directly, but it does not have to. If a fertilized egg is declared a human being with all rights and protections, research involving blastocytes must be considered at risk. It is to be hoped that California's right to research is safe, ensconced as it is within our state's constitution. But I also remember when CIRM was sued by an alleged embryo titled Jane Doe. That so-called individual was found by the judge to have no standing in the case, but we live in different times today. I realize that CIRM itself as a state agency can take no political action. However, everyone here is an individual at the top of your field and with circles of influence. It might be important to acquaint yourselves with an issue which, in my opinion, threatens this research we all support. Thank you, Don Reed.
Thank you, Don. I'm sure you're listening, not just for this very important comment, but for your incredible support throughout the years. You've been our staunchest fan out there, and we so appreciate your attention and all of the great points you've made. So thank you very much for that.
We have one more. It's from David Jensen. When does CIRM intend to begin to address publicly the ethical, financial, and other issues related to the Orchard Therapeutics abandonment of the ADA SKID trial that was being financed by CIRM? It seems that this situation could easily occur again, given the nature of the so-called one-and-done treatments for rare diseases.
It's generally our policy not to engage in Q&A in public comment, but I am going to, on this particular matter, ask Kevin Marks if he would respond to that question.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On this particular situation, I think is one in which it demonstrates the individual circumstances of each of the opportunities that get presented to us. This was a situation where Orchard decided to discontinue a development program in relation to a therapy that had been funded and created at UCLA and out-licensed to Orchard. I think in this particular situation, what we had at our disposal was the ability to work with both Orchard and UCLA to get the therapy returned to UCLA and reinserted into a clinical trial. So that we can continue or assist in UCLA in the continuance of the availability of this therapy. I think it's very difficult for us in developing a sort of public pronouncement of what we will do in each and every situation, because again, everything is unique. We have various tools at our disposal, one of which is march-in rights in particular situations. But I think it's important that we just have to ensure that when we see viable opportunities and viable therapies that potentially don't have commercial opportunities and are going to be abandoned by our for-profit partners, to ensure that they have another pathway back. And again, we have to look at each situation to determine what that viable pathway is, and how do we continue the advancement of these therapies. So really, it's up to the board to decide whether it wants to look and see if it can develop overall standards. But where I sit here, again, I think it's all depending on the individual circumstances of each of the opportunities.
Okay, thank you, Kevin, for that answer. Maria, any other public comments?
No, other than a reminder that we have an application review subcommittee on August 30th for those of you who are members, and for other board members too, if they just want to listen in.
And the next full board meeting, I believe, is September 29.
Okay.
Is that correct? Right.
That sounds good.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, thank you. And lastly, while we're in the comment period, I wondered if Al, Christina, or anybody else would like to comment on the National League West standings at this point.
I object to the chair's assertion there, and would respectfully request that he recuse himself from any other comments about Major League Baseball.
I fully support what Al just said. On behalf of everybody in San Diego, I think that's only fair.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, on that note, everybody, thank you very much for.
I'd kind of like to hear more what the chair is thinking.
Well, Fred, you're in Los Angeles. So you're
That's
on
right.
you're on my side and
Offline. Thank you.
And a
Okay.
big thanks to Marianne and Doug for all their help today. So I appreciate it.
Here.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you to everybody for a very productive meeting. We will see you.
Kevin, be sure to recycle and compost.
Okay, thank you. We will see everybody in either the August
Right
ARS
behind
or
you.
the September full board meeting.